The bankers wrote their letters in shadows cold and deep, a promise forged of iron chains to bind us in our sleep. They called it just a progress, a digital decree, but freedom has no barcode and souls are not for leave. It's the final countdown, the reckoning of men. Crypto gold and silver rise where paper dies again. They dream of central power, of money's iron cage, but voices rise unbroken to light this modern age. From DC halls to Davos, the tyrants stake their claim. They preach of safety, justice, but hunger for the chain. They hide behind the slogans. They whisper, trust the plan, but every law they're passing just enslaves the common man. It's the final countdown, the reckoning of men. Crypto gold and silver rise where paper dies again. They dream of central power, of money's iron cage, but voices rise unbroken to light this modern age. The merchants and the dreamers, the rebels and the wise, take refuge in the ledgers where the watchful state can pry. In Xano's cloak of shadows, in Monero's quiet streams, they guard the ancient promise of liberty's old dream. It's the final countdown, the reckoning of men. Crypto gold and silver rise where paper dies again. They dream of central power, of money's iron cage, but voices rise unbroken to light this modern age. So raise your hands in firelight, let tyrants hear the sound. The people's last defiance is the truth that won't back down. It's more than just survival, it's more than just a stand. It's freedom's final chorus sung across this burning land.
They raised the throne of glass and wire, a kingdom born of cold desire, and crowned the silent code that came to rule ya. It watched the trembling of your breath, it priced your life, it mapped your death, a final betrayal dressed as something true.
Bless the unbroken will, bless the unbroken will.
They promised order, promised peace, but every gift required a piece of who you were before their grid consumed you. A nation bartered for control, a ledger carved into your soul, a quiet doom disguised as forward future.
Bless the unbroken will, bless the unbroken will.
Oh, the watchers rise in the circuitry. Oh, the warnings lost in the dawn. Oh, the people bow to the ministry till every name was gone.
I walked the halls where truth was sold, where human hands grew numb and cold, and efficiency became the faith they gave you. You'd never see the chains they built, but every sunrise dripped with guilt, a quiet empire shaping your behavior.
Bless the unbroken will, bless the unbroken will.
They tokenize the land and sky,
They tokenize the land and sky.
the right to live, the right to die,
The right to live, the right to die.
a sovereign life reduced to captured measure. The future shrank to narrow lines, a cage of data, coded signs, a subtle death they dressed in borrowed pleasure.
Bless the unbroken will.
Rise though the night is closing in, rise though the stars are dimmed and still, rise though the crown is forged of sin. Bless the unbroken will. So keep your lantern in the storm, guard every soul that still feels warm, and hold the truth no tyrant's code can alter. For even at the world's last hour, a single heart can break their tower, a whispered vow the darkness cannot falter.
Bless the unbroken will, bless the unbroken will.
Land don't breathe like it used to breathe. My grandfather held the soil like scripture in his hands, but now the fields are wired tight, a fortune of nearly 500 billion running under satellite light. Just 2% decide the table for 330 million souls, while the hum of iron engines sends our birthright to the cold. They're pulling 5 gigabytes an hour, rising like a predator now, send upward to a corporate sky. The farmers locked outside. And though nearly 20 million work the gears,
Only a tiny handful touch the land. The machine grows tall, the people small, their stories slipping from their hand. Oh, the root remembers freedom, even buried in the dark. You can chain the lie with numbers, but you cannot chain the spark. This ain't farming, it's a wheel of steel and coal. Your grandfather's farm's a checkpoint on a technocratic road. They take the seed, they take the soil, they take the hours from your spine, and the machine keeps pulling everything 1 acre at a time. A quarter of the world's sea, locked behind the corporate gate. You can't save your own just by again. Let algorithms choose your fate. And nearly 10 billion animals push through corridors of chrome, where the land once sang, the servers drone. What it used to feed now grown. There's over 3 trillion in equipment. Farmers rent but never keep. And well over 300 billion in debt, pulling families in deep. Call it progress, call it glory, but I've read the hidden lines. The machine is fed by labor, and it starves the working mind. The land still knows your footsteps, even under grids and wires. The machine can dim the daylight, but it cannot drown the fire. This ain't farming, it's a wheel of steel and coal. A tiny few hold the compass for the many down below. They count your days, they count your years, they tally blood and time, and the machine keeps taking families down 1 story at a time. Your grandfather's land's been patterned, your pasture quantified, but no algorithm knows the truth of what your hands decide. This ain't farming, it's a kingdom built on screens. They turn the soil to a number, turn the farmers into means. But the land remembers kindness, and the people still alive. We outlive every empire, 1 heartbeat at a time.
Welcome back to the Aaron Day Show. This is season 2, episode 45. We have a completely packed episode tonight. We actually have not 1, not 2, but 3 guests. And so I'm going to dispense with some of the normal stuff that I would do at the beginning. Although there's so much news. I mean, I could probably talk for 2 or 3 hours just about what's going on in the last, 48 hours, frankly, with the Epstein files and everything else. But we'll save some of that for later if there's time in the Q&A, and definitely for Thursday. But for tonight, we're going to actually have 2 segments. I'm going to bring on Craig Wenclewicz, and we're going to talk about the effect of agriculture or technocracy and agriculture. So the intersection of those two concepts, which is something that's critical for people to understand. Obviously, with OS SARA, we're focusing on solutions for healthcare outside of the existing system and parallel solutions there. But there are some ideas as well that Craig is going to discuss. And as I've mentioned a long time ago, next up is food freedom and how we can create private solutions for that. So that's going to be the first part of the conversation tonight. Then we're going to have Patrick Wood and Courtney Turner on for the last half of the show to discuss their new book, which I've been recommending, and I can't recommend enough. I've read the whole book. It's actually not a very long book. It's very impactful, very concise, and very relevant to what's going on today. The book is called The Final Betrayal: How Technocracy Destroyed America, and we're going to have them on to discuss that book as well. And so that's the show for tonight. Just recapping the last few episodes. Last week, I guess it was on Monday. We didn't have the show on Thursday. I announced the launch of the Technocracy Atlas, which was great. I actually had the opportunity to announce it live on the Alex Jones Show, hosted by Mike Adams. So we've had thousands and thousands of people to the website. People are already using it, and I did a big upgrade over the weekend to the technocracyatlas.com. I added all of the Epstein information, all of the DOJ files, all of the House of Representative emails and information that came out last week. All of that plus much more has been added. We now have 38.3 million words in the database. It's got all of the stuff you would ever want on technocracy, Patrick Wood's information, Courtney Turner, many others. The book Hijacking Bitcoin is in there. The Brownstone Institute stuff is there. All of my podcast transcripts are in there. So we are really ratcheting this up. And, and I'll talk about that shortly, but there have been some revelations on that regarding Bitcoin that are critical for people to understand. And I want to say the whole purpose of this site, where this is going, is I view this as a combination of kind of Wikipedia plus open source Palantir meets the ability to fund people to do investigative journalism using privacy coins. Like it's going to morph into that. There's a bigger plan for this, but the whole point of it is to expose technocracy. They know everything about us. We know nothing about them, and we have a whole bunch of people siloed into a narrative about who's behind everything. And the only way to know who's behind everything is to put it out there in the public and to map it publicly and to rate the sources and quality of information. So that's what we're going to do. The episode before that was on with Mike Adams. Mike was on my show, and we talked about BrightU.ai and, AI in general, which we're going to continue to do more interviews together on this. This was a very popular episode. We're opening up and showing people that we don't have to submit to a digital prison, that there is a private version of this. There's a decentralized version of AI that's empowering, and I use it all the time. This is how I've been building a lot of these sites. This is what Mike Adams has been doing. He's actually launching Brighteon books, where you can actually generate your own custom book on any topic, and it's based on his system. And I've talked to him at length. I mean, he has scoured the world for information. He already had, obviously, his information from Natural News and all of the information he's been collecting over the decades, but he has invested a massive amount of time and money to collect data. And so these books that are being generated are based on actual data that he has stored on his hard drives that does fact checking based on primary sources. This is a really big deal. So I'm not sure what the launch date is for that, but I'll have him on, and then I'm sure I will be demonstrating it live before that if we can't get him on right at the launch. We have OS SARA launching. I actually realized I think I scheduled that to launch on Thanksgiving. It's going to launch the day after, to launch on Black Friday, but that will be just for early registrants. The official launch date is going to be January the 1st, but if you want to be one of the early people to actually test and give feedback on the system, you can sign up at OASARA.com. as always, I recommend, and I'm going to continue to do this, that I'm going to continue to push that you actually watch this show through theaarondayshow.com as opposed to other channels. I think it's only a matter of time before this content gets shadow banned, and there are other features on the site and a lot of other things that we're going to be able to do with the site in terms of, you can search all of the past episodes. I'm actually going to put a AI chatbot on there. You can listen to all of the songs. You can see memes. You can actually interact with other community members. There's a lot more functionality, but in order to preserve censorship resistance, I want people moving to that, because I truly think that, we're not going to be very long for these platforms, because all of these platforms are run by technocrats. So again, tonight we're going to be talking about the final betrayal, how technocracy destroyed America. You can get that book at technocracy.news, or you can get it on Amazon. So I've ordered a hard copy and also have read the Kindle version as well. You can get Mike Adams AI at brightu.ai. You can either access it on the web, or you can actually download it to your device so that you don't even need to be connected to the internet to use it. Now, this is a big thing. So I've written articles about this. It's part of my book. It's been part of every talk that we've done in 27 states and 4 countries. I've tried to tell people that Bitcoin was hijacked. I've told people that Epstein was involved. I've told people that not only was it hijacked, but the very same people that hijacked it through MIT developed all 3 US CBDC pilots. And we now have, last week, emails that have come out verifying this. I wrote a Brownstone article about it where I connected the dots, but I said, hey, listen, we know Epstein invested in the MIT multimedia lab at this time, but we didn't. But I said, I was very honest in the article. I said, we don't have the smoking gun, but here's this other information where Epstein was interviewed about Bitcoin, so on and so forth. We now have the smoking gun. He definitively funded MIT and funded Bitcoin Core developers. This is a big deal. And on Thursday, I'm going to go through all of it. But I am sick and tired of the propaganda and the censorship. I am sick and tired of the people in the liberty community that claim, oh, this is old news. Oh, this isn't a big deal. For the people that are investing their retirement savings, buying Bitcoin ETFs, thinking it's this frankly bullshit freedom money, that it's not, they would like to know this. Because in all of the talks that I've given, all of the podcasts that I've given, there are, outside of the people that maybe already listened to this, and some people like Kurt Wuckert and others who's involved with the BSV community, there are others that have been ahead of this. The general public knows nothing about this. And the general public will be horrified to learn about what's going on here. So I'm going to lay it all out. No more excuses, no more holding back. This has to get out. I'm already scheduling podcasts all over the world to talk about this yet again, but we have to get this out there, because we have to fight technocracy, and you have a bunch of pseudo-libertarians who know better, who are lying to people about Bitcoin so that they can pump their bags and get more fiat currency. And it's disgusting. So very clear, that is going to be a show you are not going to want to miss. I'll skip through the rest of this so that we can hop right in. I'm going to get Craig on. Hopefully we'll have the audio issues worked out. Hey, Craig, how are you? Can you hear me? I can't hear you if...
Oh, there we go. How's that? Can you hear me now, Aaron?
That's good.
Okay.
If someone in the comments wouldn't mind if you hear any echo, I'm seeing sounds great. We might have actually cracked the code finally.
Okay, good.
So let me see if I can. There we go. I've got that all figured out. So Craig and I have been working on this. This is mostly Craig who's put everything together for tonight for this part about agriculture. By the way, I really like this song. I think one of my favorite songs is the last song that I played before this started. I put one together on this whole agriculture thing. It was that's what it's got to be in my top 3 at this point. So anyway, we've been going back and forth. Craig hasn't seen the slides, but he put together all the information for the slides. So this should go well. And actually, we're five minutes ahead. I figured it would take me until 6:30 to get this off. So we're ready to go. So I've got my notes, but I've just got the slides. So if you just, we can just kind of wing this. We've got all the info, but I laid the groundwork earlier. It's technocracy is everywhere. And when you research what's going on, it's a big deal in food. And so we're going to walk through tonight what that's all about, how the agricultural industry works, how truly devastatingly bad it is if you're not already aware of it. And then Craig has some ideas for what we might do about that. So do you want to start here? I've got this. I'm just following your notes, kind of the agricultural machine, kind of the opening gambit here.
Yeah. So recently in the news, we've seen the stuff going on with the beef, and so it's been getting a lot of attention. But this has been going on for a long time. It's really been building since the 1960s through the 1980s, and we're going to probably get into a little bit of that. And it's this technocracy, right? Patrick Wood's been talking about this for a long time. This isn't anything new. This has been building for, what do we say, Aaron, 100+ years? Would you say, this technocracy wave that we're in? And it feels like we're getting, deeply, I don't know, how far would you say we are into it, Aaron? I know you're saying things are moving really quickly now. From an agricultural perspective, I think we're getting pretty close to, right? If you're looking at all these different components of technocracy and you look at them in parallel, I don't know, this food thing feels pretty far along to me, especially from the cattle rancher perspective. And that's what's been in the news. That's kind of what we want to get into, at least highlight that tonight. What are your thoughts on that, Aaron? How far along do you think we are on things, and with the food part in mind?
Well, and with the food part in mind, I think it's a similar thing. If you go to technocracyatlas.com, we have a tab called threat level. And what we've done there is we've analyzed what's going on globally with respect to digital IDs, digital currencies, and AI surveillance. And, when you really dig into where we already are, not where it's going, it's pretty bad. 60% of Americans already have real ID, which is digital in 11 states, 20 more within the next few months. We have the Genius Act and tokenized assets. I mean, I'd argue we're 80% of the way there plus on essentially what people worry about with CBDC programmable money. And you can see the breakdown, that we're about 72% of the way there on AI and surveillance. And this is looking at Palantir, OpenAI, and all of the other stuff, the NSA programs that are going on. And so from what I've seen with the food, it's the same thing. We're basically dealing with now 4 companies that control everything. And from when you dig into this more and more and more, you find that it's already consolidated, and it's already supply chain. Everything's already tracked. So, I mean, I'd say we're 70-80% of the way there.
Well, it's funny you have those numbers 80%, because it's pretty. We're pretty solid on the fact that those four packers, the 4 that we're going to talk about tonight, as we get down into this, it's about 80 to 85%. They have control of 80 to 85% of the market. So it fits right in line with what you're talking about, Aaron, on these other fronts, so no surprise there. And so what does this mean? It means that we have consumers on one side, right? Purchasing beef, meat, chicken, pork, all these different things. And then we have the cattle ranchers on the other side. Okay. And they've been pressed for a long time. And, we'll talk about how they got there and how this whole thing evolved. They're not getting fair prices, even though live cattle. So we measure cattle in 2 different ways, right? We've got, basically, the way I like to think about it is we've got cattle up until so from the time they're born until they're teenagers, let's just say, right? You have that. And then usually what happens is the cattle usually get turned over at that point, and they take them from teenagers into adult. And the whole goal at that point is to basically fatten them up. So the first goal is to make sure they're healthy, keep them disease free. Then you get it to that certain point where they're teenagers, and the goal is to fatten them up. And a lot of farmers, that's their goal, is to fatten them up as quickly and get them to market as quickly as possible. The problem is that even though we're at all-time highs on both of those forms, that we look at those in terms of live cattle and feeder cattle and live cattle, And both of them are at all-time high prices. But ranchers are about ready to go out of business because they're getting pressed from every single angle. They've been under pressure for a long time. And this last government shutdown actually hit them pretty hard because they need funding. And a lot of the funding they get is through government-associated banking, government backstop banking. And so when that shuts down, they're at harvest time, right? So they're harvesting, they're doing the things they need to do, to end their growing season in a lot of the US, and they get pressured even more. So they're really under pressure, and it's been hitting the media in a lot of different ways. You probably have seen something on this I would imagine, right? I don't know. Have you seen it out there too, or have you seen this getting covered or not so much?
Well, I've seen start to get covered, but I mean, I follow this. I follow food freedom, so I don't know if that means it's hitting the general public or not. I don't know, but I know I've seen it.
Yeah. So, what this boils down to is we have food. All of it's been high, right? We've been going through this for at least so up until about 2020, we had 2019, 2020 into that COVID window of time. We were at 1.82% inflation, and then we really skyrocketed with a lot of things and some of the things that got hit the hardest were food, right? All food's gone up pretty extreme, but beef is high on the list. Huge extreme increases in price. Same thing with frozen juices, overall grocery bills and dining. I mean, I'm sure anybody who's been out dining, I mean, your bills, it seems to me like double what it used to be. And then obviously we've seen housing go through this, motor vehicle repair insurance, right? Some of the largest spikes in the last 5 years of all time. And cigarettes, obviously, not something we should be probably, doing too much with, but nonetheless, the price has been high on that as well. And again, it goes back to tobacco. So again, it's still an agriculture component, right? And so the question is, do we really think that all these high prices are an accident? So I think of it, energy, gasoline as an example. There were times where we were told we were running out of gasoline. There's no gas. We're going to run out of gas. We're going to run short on this, right? They did this thing. They measured this thing called the Henry Hub, where we thought we were at the hinge point where we'd gotten to the peak amount of oil, and we were on the downward hill of this. And they were saying $300 a barrel for oil. But now we see, these different, industry, what groups, I guess, the IEAE, right? They're in the energy space, and they measure this, and they say that they think we're going to be oversupplied for years, right? So the question is we have every reason to believe that we can feed the world, and we can feed it efficiently, okay? It's geopolitics and the control factors that get in the way. And some of this is economic, some of it's geopolitical, tariffs maybe a little bit. Some of this is definitely technocracy, and some of this is just evil, right? To prep society and weaken them for universal basic income, I think. And so what we want to go into tonight is this technocracy and agriculture. And technology, okay, can be our friend. And Aaron does a nice job of always trying to differentiate these two, technology and technocracy, right? Technocracy is using technology to manage and control societies and industries by elite classes, so-called technical experts. Okay. And so that's what we're talking about here tonight, is using this technology to pervasively control this space. And when we see that 80 to 85% of this, the meat, the cattle and beef industry is controlled by 4 players in the field. This is what we're talking about, right? It's become pervasive. All right. And so do you have any of those clips, Aaron, by chance, or did you?
I do. And before we get into this, I'm just trying to look at the notes that you sent over, but just to frame this, a little bit of data. Agriculture employs 19.7 million people, but only 1.4% of them actually farm. The rest just manage the machines. John Deere collects 5 gigabytes of data per hour, uploading everything to corporate clouds that farmers don't even access. Monsanto Bayer controls 23% of global seeds. The system processes 9.5 billion animals annually through industrial facilities. And the supporting infrastructure includes $3.4 trillion in equipment that farmers lease but don't own. And so then this farm credit system holds $374 billion in agricultural debt, keeping farmers essentially perpetually leveraged and enslaved. So So anyway, what just to and I'm trying to see your notes because I don't want to steal your thunder on this, and I want to make sure we've got the
go ahead. No, we're in it together. There's no thunder. You can take the thunder.
Well, no, I know you put this together. I don't know if I'm actually taking your stuff or not. But anyway,
that's good. Run with it. No, it's good. We'll just back and forth through this whole thing. Let's just work through it together. It's perfect. Yeah.
Good. So I've got these 3 clips. Which do you want me to play them all, or do you want me to start with a particular one?
I think it was the second one that I sent you. It's the one about $10 a pound for meat and supply constraints.
Look, domestically, we need to get our arms around it. Last time we got together, we talked about how the herd is at a 70-year low, demand is at an all-time high, and the net result is prices are through the roof. So there's this concept in the industry called heifer retention, and it's a decision that the rancher and the feedlot operator make to hold back the female animal to build the herd as opposed to send it to market. Now, that's a double-edged sword. We've started to see good signals that that's happening, but that means that the supply is going to continue to shrink as fewer cattle are going to market. So we are headed for what I'm calling, Maria, the $10 a pound reality. By third quarter of 26, families are going to see $10 a pound ground beef in the grocery store. So we're in for a bit of a haul here. I don't believe we'll see price come down in any meaningful way until sometime in 2027.
Okay. So the question is, do we think that's an accident, Aaron?
Well, I don't think we think it's an accident. I actually just saw that somebody died from that alpha gal tick, this new tick-borne disease where people become allergic to red meat, and someone just died from that. So that's a little bit off topic, but somewhat on topic. I don't think that any of this is a mistake at all, because again, part of the transition to technocracy is to create an emergency situation where people feel they don't have any choice but to take what it is that they offer. And so obviously, food inflation is one of the biggest areas of concern for everyone.
Yeah. Well, and so the beef's caught in the headlines lately. And I think what we want to do is go through and just talk a little bit about farming in general, right? Some of this is pretty obvious, but at its core, the U.S. agriculture is a massive system for producing food, fuel, and raw materials. Now, what people have probably forgotten, in 2008, we got into a period of time where, again, a lot of it was political, but we started using a lot of food for fuel, and that became the headlines on a lot of magazines, right? Is corn food or is it fuel? And it's really become both, right? They use it for ethanol and so forth. And we also use corn. Well, we'll get into that, but farmers, essentially, it's those 3 things, right? Food, fuel, and raw materials. And farmers, obviously, we have the farmers, right, who grow the crops and raise the livestock. And then we have processors, okay, who turn the raw products into things like flour, cheese from the cows, right? Or they turn into biofuels and then mix it with different types of petroleum products like what's called RBOB gasoline. And that's what we get when you go to the gas pump and you see the 10% ethanol and so forth. And then we get distributors. These are the people who move the food across the country and the world. And this is ripe for technocracy, right? This whole logistical supply chain. And then we have the retailers who sell it to the consumers. And then we get supporting systems like Aaron was talking about with John Deere, right? The equipment makers, the seed companies, the Monsantos, the Bayers. Then all the research that goes into this. And then there's a lot of government agencies that surround this whole space. Obviously, the USDA is the one that pops to mind. Okay, so again, we talk about this government, we talk about, big business, and then the combination of those things and the technocracy, okay? And so we can think of this as a giant network designed to convert land, water, sunlight, and labor into reliable supplies of foods and goods. And these are all things that we talked about, right, Aaron, whether it's on the Technocracy Roundtable or wherever, or, these natural asset corporations, all these things that technocracy would like to tokenize.
Yeah, would like to tokenize and are actively tokenizing. And, to this point, as far as centralization is concerned, we produce 119 billion pounds of corn, 4.1 billion bushels of soybeans, and slaughter of 34 million cattle annually. But 4% of farms control 48% of the production value. And so it's grown by corporate systems that are running on, a combination of algorithms, debt, and government subsidies The government subsidies for this are $40.5 billion this year alone. So just to put all that into perspective.
Yep. And in that space, we've got the U.S. happens to be one of the biggest world producers, and we a lot in South America, right? We know Ukraine, huge breadbasket for Europe, and then Europe, of course. We get into things like corn, right? Used for livestock feed, sweeteners, corn syrup, which obviously isn't always the best product, but it's used significantly across a lot of the processed foods we get. And then the ethanol we were talking about, soybeans used for feed, oil, and exports. We just went through the trade deal. The big deal was trying to sell $25 billion worth of soybean per year to China. And with that and this stuff becomes a weapon too, because, China's been trying to exert a lot. Again, it's who is China and what is the U.S., what is China? But the point is, it's a lot of South America has been sort of hijacked and held hostage a lot from an agricultural perspective. So this isn't just I guess my goal in all this is to at least open up the idea, the lens of looking at this from a worldwide perspective and how people use agriculture to exert pressure, again, upon different geographical regions of the world. Okay. And then we get wheat, we get rice. Those are pretty common things: beef, pork, chicken, dairy products, cotton, specialty crops like fruits, nuts, and vegetables. And then we get soft commodities, things like coffee, cocoa, orange juice. Mostly orange juice in that space is to be concentrated, that comes out of Florida and so forth. And then we get sugars. And so as we look at this across the U.S., of course, we get the Midwest specializes in grains. The West, California, dominates the fruits and vegetable space. And then the South focuses a lot on cotton, poultry, and a fair amount of livestock. A lot of this livestock, not to get too complicated here, but Texas does a lot of the reporting on the prices of the beef. And so just because it's kind of the center, not necessarily, but it gets considered as the center in terms of when we go to price these things in the market. Texas becomes a big component. I'll just leave it at that. Texas is very important when they're pricing beef price, when beef is getting priced. Okay. And let's see, we've got this here where anything you wanted to add to that, Aaron?
Nope. That's good.
Okay. And then we've got this next slide, how the industry works. So we've got the inputs. We have seeds, fertilizers, equipment, feed. Then we have production. We have farms that grow crops or raise animals. Then we have the processing of it. The raw items get cleaned, they get milled, cooked, and packaged. And then obviously the distribution, right? The trucking, the rail, the ports. And a lot of this stuff is even air. You think of certain things are very time sensitive, like fish or something, right? We forget that. We don't include that in here but there is fish harvesting and so forth. And that'll come, from the coastline, and it'll get shipped in by air. So we got those four forms of transportation. And then of course, then we get the sales. We get grocery stores, restaurants, and then a lot of this stuff goes to the export market. And again, this gets into tariffs, right? And tariffs play a big role. Currency plays a big role in this as well, right? The currency conversion. And so again, that gets us into, the form of currencies and the digital currency at some point. I don't know. Do we want to blend any of that in with this, Aaron, or do we want to kind of keep this on that? Is anything you want to blend in there with? You did a little bit. Anything with the digital currencies or tokenization currency?
Not yet on this. I mean, I think it'd be good to do a general overview on this, but maybe towards the end if we have time. I just want to make sure we don't run out of time, because I know Courtney and Patrick will be on soon. So
okay, how much time do we have?
We got about 45 minutes.
Okay, good. All right, so let's keep rolling through this. So then we've got on this next slide examples of data-driven farming, right? Precision agriculture.
Yeah, I just wanted to add one thing to that, just about from a technocracy perspective. If you look at this from going from seed to shelf, there are something like 1,847 steps through the supply chain. And it's so complex that when there was a ransomware attack on one of these big companies, JBS, in 2021, it shut down 20% of America's meat supply in 48 hours. So just as a kind of a data point about how interconnected these things are technically, and how the supply chains are structured, because this is going to be a big point when you start looking at the choke points in this entire system. When you have that, when you have the market consolidated into that few players, but then you have all of these steps, and then it's all centrally controlled electronically. A lot of the stuff is in the cloud. A lot of big risk factors there.
And we don't think, and that's a good point, because you don't think that agriculture would have any connection with a cyber attack or something, but it would be significantly damaged with a cyber attack, right?
Oh yeah, it would be completely devastated. I mean, again, one company, and then all of a sudden 20% of the entire supply of beef was shut down in 48 hours. So when people talk about the impact of these cyber attacks, I mean, you could imagine how a well-coordinated attack, and of course, most of these guys are using Microsoft, or they're using, the same big tech companies. So if there's some big exploit that affects all of Microsoft or all of Oracle, I mean, it could take down not just agriculture, multiple supply chains.
Yep. And that's what we think of as a logistical side, but there's a lot that goes into farming that people may not be aware of. So a lot of the tractors are now GPS driven, and they'll actually, when they're harvesting or when they're planting, they'll run all night long, and so they're running off a GPS, and essentially you just set the coordinates, and there's not much to do. And a lot of these things could even be controlled remotely. So you get drones monitoring crop health, and obviously, predictions on yield as well. So a lot of the pricing that goes into the corn during the growing season is monitored by someone. Either people drive along the side of the road, they stop, they check out the corn, they see, okay, it looks like we're going to get, and they start making estimates on how many bushels per whatever, and the same thing with these drones. They'll monitor the crop health and so forth. Then we get sensors that are telling farmers when to water. Not only that, we have remote controlled irrigation for crop circles. So I'm sure people have seen, a lot of the aerial photos of, you'll be out in this desolate area somewhere out in the, the Great Plains or something like that. For instance, like Nebraska, and then you'll see this green circle. Well, that's a crop circle. So they're sitting on some kind of an aquifer. So that aquifer, has a certain water table in it. And again, this is all, resources, right? So again, it goes back to resources and controlling the resources and the technocracy and the efficiency of all that. But the key is that a lot of the farm ground and the pricing of it is based on what kind of water tables in some of these areas, because they don't get a lot of natural rain. Certain parts of the country don't get that, but they do sit on these aquifers. So what they'll do is they'll actually run these crop circles from a distance, and they can run this irrigation circle that just goes around and waters it. And that can all be controlled remotely as well. But obviously it breaks down, but generally speaking, if everything's operationally correct, it runs, pretty much human free. So then we get into algorithms that decide the best planting times, not so much the harvesting times, but they do measure the moisture content in the agriculture, but that's still pretty, I think the planning is more algorithmically driven than the harvesting. And so what this does, it shifts the farming from traditional intuition, which has been going on really for 20 to 30 years, into more of a measurable optimization. And again, this leads us right down the path to the technocracy. And if you want, Aaron, we could probably run this one here. Let's hold off for a second. Let's go through the next slide. I want to run this next clip with Josh Hawley. Let's wait for a little bit longer on that. So this, the next thing to talk about is the supply chain coordination and how the food moves through tightly timed nationwide logistics systems. And again, this is based on efficiency, resilience to shocks, weather, pandemics, and then the allocation of the resources. Okay. And then we get into things like environmental resource management, right? Agriculture uses significant amount of land, water, and energy. And the technocratic approach looks at a lot of different little factors, right? Like sustainable yield models, carbon emissions, water efficiency, and soil health metrics. So there's a lot of inputs that go into this, a lot more than I think what people really consider with this. And then just to keep rolling through this, we've got the government's component to this, right? So, and policy that goes into all this stuff. And so we have government programs. And the way that this was set up initially was, obviously we had homesteaders, right? That went out, they got their 40 acres, their 80 acres, whatever it may have been. And then it got passed down through generations. And the goal was to create a very diverse ownership, to keep corporations from coming in and taking over huge swaths of land and running this like a big, technocratic operation. But that sort of broke down, but the way that they protected it was the government backstops farmers. So if someone has a hail damage to a crop, or they have a wind damage, or flooding, or a drought, or something like that, what the government steps in, and then they sort of provide insurance to them. Okay. But if you're a single landowner and you get more than a certain amount of acreage, then you exceed the limit on the insurance. And the whole concept of this is to keep it from backstopping the large corporations. So you can't stop the corporations or outside entities from owning the land, right, and running these operations. But what you can do is you can curtail the amount of benefits they get, insurance, backstop, government backstop that goes into this stuff. Okay. And what was I going to say else about this? Anything you wanted to add to that, Aaron? Any thoughts with that?
Well, one step back, when we were talking about resource extraction metrics, this is something that's probably worth pointing out is what's going on with some of the approaches and technologies that are being used. So, for instance, Iowa's lost 50% of its topsoil in the last 150 years. California has depleted a significant percentage of its water. You have nitrogen runoff going on that's created a 6,000 square mile dead zone in the Gulf of Mexico. In terms of pesticide resistance, now you have 250 weed species that are now resistant to herbicides and require now stronger chemicals, if you can imagine what the implications of that might be. And then you have 40% of bee colonies die annually from agricultural chemicals. And so people talk a lot about, the importance of bees, but people don't talk about the fact that it's these agricultural chemicals that are a big part of it. So there's a lot going on here. And it's one of those things where you have these corporate practices that are causing some of these problems. And then, of course, what is the solution to the problem that they've created? More chemicals, more technology, and more things that are actually reducing the quality of our food. One of the reasons that we have the health problems that we have is that our foods are just simply not nutrient dense anymore. And they're not nutrient dense anymore because a lot of these large scale corporate farming practices.
Well, and that's what I was thinking too. When you did the healthcare thing, and you walked through the Rockefellers and the whole engine, right? It's this engine, keep fixing people, but don't really make them healthy. And that's the thing, as farming, and some of it's just mistakes. When we had tractors, just tractors, they weren't that powerful. And so what happened is farmers would go out and they would till. And then they would come back and then they would plant, right? And then they would come back and they would spray and then they would harvest. Now they have the combines that are super powerful and they can just do no till. So they just roll through and they basically, essentially one swoop through and they've prepped it and seeded and they move on. So that creates less of the depletion of the soil like you were talking about. So that's a good thing. But then we start getting into the chemicals and we get the GMO seeds, right? These genetically modified seeds that are that are weather resistant, or, that's the big thing is drought resistance. I think that's probably one of the primary focal points is drought resistance. And again, this stuff's engineered in labs, right? And it fits right into this whole technocratic movement. And, but the big thing is, like Aaron was saying, I think the quality of the food goes down because it's all about getting yield, right? It's all about yield. And why is that? Because it's all about, trying to maximize the profit and not necessarily maximize the health of the person that's consuming this food. And so, so that's that part of it. And then we got through a little bit of the government, the government programs like the crop insurance and so forth. And then, so just taking a big picture on this, we've got the U.S. agriculture industry is therefore, because of all this, highly productive, highly technological, deeply interconnected, okay, and influenced by science, economics, and policy, okay? And so from a technocratic viewpoint, right, it's essentially a giant nationwide operation that goes on. And so the question, though, is, so that's all great, right? We go down this path of increasing the efficiency of farming, adding technology, adding, economic factors to it. How are we going to manage this? How are we going to provide loans to these farmers so they can buy. So it's very difficult anymore with land prices to actually go in and buy a farm and get enough acres. And a lot of times, we get this urban creep. So you start creeping into the farming, a lot in the farming sector. There's still a lot of farmland out there, but we are creeping into it. And all this stuff drives the price of the land up. And so it's very difficult for new farmers to enter this market. And what does that do? It just leads to corporations who are more sophisticated, have bigger balance sheets to roll in and pick up some of this land. Some of this land, and I live in Ohio, and some of the land here is going for $25,000 an acre. So you think about how much yield does it take to get on corn or soybeans or wheat or something to actually make it a profitable endeavor? And so that's where it goes back into the control, right? And you can see when this stuff, I feel like the farming's getting out of control from the perspective of the cost to enter the market and then the cost to actually survive, okay, especially when the government isn't necessarily working on your behalf. And we'll get into that in a few minutes here with these big four and what they've done from a lobbying standpoint. But it's a very difficult endeavor for the farmers in many different ways. But with that, if you want, Aaron, you could probably run this one on Josh Hawley talking about monopolies. You see that one?
Yeah, let me run that.
In my last remaining seconds here, Mr. Metter, let me come back to you. You've said that big is bad, which I completely agree with, and that we need to consider structural remedies. Is that true outside of the tech sector? I know you said that about tech. Is that true more broadly?
I believe the competition concerns that have been most recognized in the tech sector are common in many other sectors. We need to enforce the antitrust laws evenly across the entire economy.
Good. Let me just give you one example here. 4 companies currently control over 80% of beef processing in this country, and very similarly high shares of poultry and pork. In Missouri, just in the last year, we have had 2 poultry plants closed by the dominant poultry processor, Tyson Food, canceling contracts with farmers, putting hundreds of people out of work across my state, really acting with total impunity. Why? Because they are essentially a monopolist. Is this the kind of thing that the FTC could take action on?
Yes, with the small caveat that the Department of Justice typically handles the packers, but the FTC sees this at the retail level as well. When there are a smaller number of packers, retailers pay higher prices, and then consumers pay higher prices, and then retailers want to merge and consolidate their own part of the supply chain to counteract that, and then it's sort of an arms race to see who can get the biggest, the fastest.
I'll end with this. Right now, beef processing is just one example, but it's a perfect example for a state like mine. The only people who win are the monopolists. If you're a cattle rancher, you're not getting paid for your product. If you are a consumer at the grocery store, you're paying an arm and a leg for some hamburger. And yet the consumers are paying more, the farmers are getting paid less. Who is really making out like a bandit here? It's the monopolists. It's the 4 companies that control 80% of beef processing. That is not competition. We need more competition in this country, economy-wide. Thank you, Mr.
Okay. Do you have any comments on that, Aaron?
Well, the one thing I want to say about this is, I think antitrust law is largely BS. The reason that we have the problem that we have with these 4 players controlling the market is government itself. So, for instance, while the original ideas were, as you said earlier on, restricting the amount of acreage, antitrust enforcement, price transparency, and so forth, what's happened in agriculture is the same as what has happened with big pharma and healthcare. It's a revolving door. 127 USDA officials joined agribusiness companies since 2000. So this is just like Scott Gottlieb being the head of the FDA and then going and being on the Pfizer board. The top 10% of farms receive 77% of all subsidies, which is an average of almost $250,000 annually. So again, why are these companies larger? Or why do we have such a small concentration? In part because they're being subsidized. If you actually had a market, it's unclear that you would have that kind of concentration. But literally, the capture is so great that we're actually giving the larger players money, and we're giving the larger players an advantage in the marketplace. Then you have the other one, which is always the case, which crushes small business always, which is compliance costs. So food safety rules cost a small processor $100 per cow, but a large one, it only costs $10 per cow. So once again, the government is coming in and favoring the larger player or making it impossible almost for the smaller players to exist. Big Ag has spent almost $750 million on lobbying in just the past decade. So that's my high level comment on that, is just that I think it's funny listening to these congressmen talk about antitrust and talk about it as if the government wasn't the one aiding and abetting the unnatural monopolies that have formed.
Yeah. No, I think you're spot on there. And so, with these big foreign mines, we have JBS, right, Brazilian-based, Cargill, which is a private company, National Beef, Tyson, okay, names most of us know. National Beef, most people probably don't know. But what they've done is they've found a way to corner the beef market, okay, and they've gotten a lot of the government either looking the other direction or subsidizing it, okay. And like Aaron was saying, we've seen this. This isn't anything new. This has been going on for a long time. These ranchers have been struggling for really decades. And so what brought that on? Massive automation of slaughter facilities, investment in the 1960s through the 1980s. Okay. And then they standardized it as an assembly line style of fabrication. Okay. Then they go to refrigerated and boxed beef technology. Okay. Shipping the stuff in boxes, not whole carcasses. So again, there's an efficiency component there. But here's what's going on is these innovations, while they lower the per unit cost, okay, and you have these smaller, okay, older regional plants, they just can't keep up with this. They don't have the pre-cut, the vacuum pack, the reduce, and a lot of that leads to reduced labor needs. Okay, so again, it's an efficiency thing, and we're going to see more and more of that, right, with this AI and the reduction in need for this, especially robotics and things like that. So this isn't going away. This reduction in labor needs is and when they measure the farm numbers, at the first Friday of every month, the non-farm payrolls, that's what they do. They figure the non-farm payrolls. Okay. So there's a reason they break that out. But the key is for these big operators, they get transportation advantages, right? And they're able to cut out the cost and the spoilage. Okay. And so they adopted this model early. And not only that, and this boxed beef process, okay, and that made a big difference for them. But here's the thing, is that the government looked the other way in terms of mergers and acquisitions. And so what it did is allowed them to get scale. And while the small guy has no balance sheet, has a very difficult time growing a farm operation, especially as they see land costs going up and it keeps slipping away, right? There's a divergence between these corporate operations like this and the little guy, okay, especially from the rancher perspective. You get these mergers like Tyson buys out a big operator called IBP. JBS acquires Swift, Smithfield Beef, and others. Cargill and National Beef consolidate multiple plants together. So they get this scale, right? And the government looks the other way almost all the time, right? Why is that? Because they get the lobby. So as it was said in that clip, the FTC, right, they're involved in this, but it really comes down to the DOJ. And so we have these acts in place, right? The Sherman Antitrust Act of 1890 was built to try to help protect these, these operators. The Clayton Act of 1914 is one of them that also factors in. And then you get this one called the PSA, the Packers and the Stockyards Act of 1921. And so the lobbying has been so significant, shaping the outcome, right, in allowing this oligopoly to form, okay? And you get these groups that form, okay, like this NCBA, AMI, these large Packer coalitions, and they lobby against this Packer and Stockyards Act. And not only that, we see this in politics all the time. We see it in pharmaceuticals. We see it everywhere where people will migrate in, they'll become part of the government, and then they migrate out to private industry. And it's the same kind of thing that happens in this agribusiness, right? The interests help shape the legislation and the agency oversight. And as soon as they get that shape, then they're valuable out on the open market. They go out there, they know how the system works, and then they exploit it, right? The farmer, he's just been he grew up on that farm. It got handed down to him. It got handed down to his from his grandfather, from his father, and they don't have that advantage, right? They're not in there shaping legislation and agency policy, right? So there's not only do we have an efficiency and a scalability, right, from this and for these feedlots and for these packers, but you get the mergers and acquisitions, you get the scale, then you get that insight, right, that you get by moving in and out of private to public. Okay. And so the question is this, I think we have that other one, Aaron. we could probably run this one real quickly. We have that last clip, and then we'll go in. We can start talking about some of the solution on this.
President Trump has really got to think about it. Who put him in office? The American rancher, the rural farmer, by a widespread margin, voted for President Trump. And I really think he needs to listen to him.
Now, the only price we have that's high is beef, and we'll get that down. And one of the things we're thinking about doing is beef from Argentina.
Some farmers are calling the move a betrayal of the American rancher.
The traders on the market use this as an excuse to drive the feeder cattle board down and live cattle board down. What that did essentially is it trickled back into the local auction markets. It took billions of dollars out of the hands, out of the pockets of the cow-calf producers in the United States. Speaking for us personally, it cost us a couple $100,000 in valuation.
Looks like we've lost around $200 a head in value. That would be around a $17 billion hit. This is at a time when these producers were getting close to being profitable after decades of losing money and losing equity.
It's the first time they've made money in a long time. It's the first time they've been in the black. And to have that rug pulled out from under them while they're getting their loans paid down and everything else is a pretty tough blow for them.
One thing President Trump is admitting to is the high price of beef. And he just posted, I've asked the DOJ to immediately begin an investigation into the meat packing companies who are driving up the price of beef through illicit collusion.
Doesn't this sound like we're in 2023, 2024, when Joe Biden was talking about exactly the same thing?
I think everybody needs to understand that the cattle industry and the beef industry are two separate things. And the big packers that control the beef industry, they set the price really, and they are driving this with their imports.
They have all the controlling contracts with the Walmarts, the Safeways. So when you get an independent producer trying to sell meat to one of those places, they can't get into that marketplace.
They'll force the little guy to leverage themselves to the hilt, and then they pull the rug out from underneath him and the little guy goes broke. It's a game plan we've seen before. It's a game plan we'll see again.
Meat packers are selling box beef higher to the retailer, who in turn is charging America's consumers record high prices for beef at the retail level.
The price of cattle has absolutely nothing to do with the price of beef. It sounds silly, but that's exactly what it is. As long as box beef trade continues to be steady or higher, that means that the packers are moving the boxes to the retail segment. That means the retail segment is going someplace with it at a profit. And unless the consumer just totally shuts off buying it in mass, the price is going to stay pretty close to where it's at.
Okay. So any thoughts on that, Aaron, or I think you're muted. Maybe not. There we go.
I think it'll be surprising for people that everything is consolidated into these 4 companies. And it's not really so much of a statement on what was just said there, although in looking at this, there were 5,000 small plants, and now there are 30 mega facilities. And obviously this speaks to the whole, ability of leverage finance to influence all this. And of course, when you dig into these companies, who owns the big 4, you're going to come up with BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street, with the exception of Cargill, which it's a family-owned private business. But who knows who actually owns it, right? I'd be very curious. I mean, has a sovereign wealth fund come in? We really don't know who owns it. We think we know who owns it, and so in addition to this massive consolidation, we're not going to explore it here, but you talk about things like, all right, well, if you wanted to introduce mRNA vaccines into the population, if you only have four points of entry, it's something that's pretty easy to do. I think I'm sure we will at some point do a whole episode on this side of things, like on the quality of meat. I know, I will tell you, we can't really do Costco anymore. Costco used to be 5 years ago, a place that you could go, like if you were keto, you could go to Costco and they actually had good products. They actually had a pretty good selection, and it was certainly a lot cheaper. And then my wife and I noticed that all kinds of things were happening. We found that we had to check the food labels of things that we already purchased because the ingredients were actually evolving over time. So all of a sudden, maltodextrin started to be introduced into everything, which is something that actually spikes your blood sugar more than sugar. Then all of a sudden, they're putting dyes into meat. My wife is allergic to one thing, and that, there are these meat sticks, and then all of a sudden they decided to put cockroach something or other in it. I mean, was it cockroach? What was it? Carmine. All right, my bad. Oh, from beetle. All right, wait a minute, beetle. Anyway, in any event, but the point is, then you see these images from Costco of worms in the meat and all kinds of other stuff. Well, that's really worrisome when you consider that when you're going to Costco or you're going to any of these places, they're getting all of this sourced from these 4 companies. And so that's off topic, but I do think it's a big part of the technocratic element of this big 4 takeover.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and that's the part that leads to, the unhealthiness, the universal basic income, the you're going to get, you're going to eat bugs and you're going to like it, the whole World Economic Forum deal. And so, but I think you're hitting on the right points here that the point is this: the acts are there. If the government wanted to curb this, they would have already done it. They're not coming to the rescue. At what point would they have come along, Aaron? 60%, 50%, 80%? They're not coming. You know what I mean? At 90, 95, I mean, when do you think they're going to show up and actually protect this rancher? I don't think they're going to come to protect this rancher.
They're destroying the rancher. There's no incentive.
Exactly.
There's actually no part of the way that the regulatory agencies work for the small rancher to think he's going to get any help. It's disadvantaged by the government against the small rancher.
Yep. And so that is what gives us the opportunity here, I think, right? Is when things get this far to an extreme, it's either about ready to implode or there's a massive opportunity. And so, again, we know that human beings don't necessarily like to make change, but when things are this stretched, again, you've got the consumer who's being stretched from an inflation standpoint. The cost of, goods are going up. And then you have the rancher, okay, who's actually, responsible for, raising, understanding how this works, maybe not as technologically advanced as these big 4 and the packers, and they don't have all this. But the point is, they also are more likely to not put, different types of, give them shots, hormone shots, right? That they, again, make our meat less healthy, right? And that, like Aaron said, that's a whole other topic. But you've got the rancher who's willing to bend, okay, and do things differently because they don't have a choice, right? They're about ready to be completely eradicated. Then you have the consumer who's sitting here saying, well, you mean to tell me that I could actually get lower priced beef and pick who it's from? So the key is, can we create some sort of an exchange here where you return this back on these middle 4, and you say, you just basically, there was a joke in there and I lost it, but the point is give them the 4, I guess, give them anyway. So the point is that, can we create some sort of an exchange? The problem is, if the government hasn't stepped in yet, they're not going to step in and defend an operation like that, where the consumer bypasses, these 4 packers and goes straight to the rancher. Okay. But that's the key, and so people say buy local, right? You go to your local rancher. The problem is that's not always efficient because you might live in a region of the country where there is no cattle. Okay. So a lot of this is regionally based, and can that be overcome? Sure. But that's harder to overcome than just creating some sort of an exchange where, and a lot of these products, right? The technology, again, not the technocracy, the technology can be our friend in this, where we set up some sort of a situation where, because one of the things that's missing is the processor, right? We went through all the steps of you've got the person, who raises the cattle, then you got to process it, and then you got to ship it. Okay. The big tech's already put in the shipping, right? The logistical supply chains are already there. Now, could they potentially shut that down with different barcodes? Potentially, right? So that could become an issue. But other than that, all it really takes is local processors, right? That can be validated and say, okay, yeah, and a lot of these are probably plants that still exist. They're just, empty and been dilapidated. They could be revived. the key though is, can the rancher make their product available and grade it, you know, in terms of, no, you know, again, people go for different qualities of meat depending upon affordability and so forth. But you could, you know, qualify this beef, put it on some sort of an exchange, and then you can offer that to the consumer who's looking. So if the consumer can get higher quality beef at a lower price, it's a no-brainer. Okay. And so, and they can have all this choice. It just makes sense, you know, and so it cuts out some of the store, cuts out the processors, cuts out a lot of the middle of this whole thing. The question is, how would they shut this down? We saw a similar type of a revolt, a similar type of a situation with the trucker rally. The problem with that was, you know, you get these people who are upset. They're willing to do something about it, right? They're willing to take a stand and make a change, okay, for something they believe in. And then guess what happens? They come in and they shut you down. Ultimately, what shut that down was putting controls on them from a banking perspective, okay? And with all this, again, tokenization, the fintech, all these things that are building, we have very little control unless we do something from a privacy standpoint, okay? So that's the key. The currency, the exchange from the rancher to the consumer has to have a privacy component to it. And that's exactly what, you know, Aaron's been talking about here with Zano, Freedom Dollar, and so forth, is trying to create that process in between the person who makes it, the person who needs to consume it, giving a better product to the consumer, giving more margin, right? More margin back to the rancher where they can actually make a better product, and turning this back against the big four. So technology, we call this disintermediation, right? The problem is it always gets played out on us, right? The disintermediation always hits the little guy. It hardly ever hits the big guy. But we have an opportunity here because, again, ultimately, if we can find each other, if the rancher can find the consumer and the consumer can find the rancher, we have a chance here to really disintermediate the system against this monopoly or oligopoly that's been formed against us.
Yeah, and actually, one thing I want to add to that front is, you know, Mike Adams does food testing. This is one of the things that, you know, as health ranger, he became very popular for, and I believe he had a book called Food Forensics. But the USDA, they do a horrible job at testing the quality of the food. They fail at that. There are market-based solutions for that could be part of this. So kind of what we're talking about with the healthcare marketplace is, all right, here's a global marketplace of places where you can go and you can get medical services, and you can use privacy coins to pay for it, and you can build in a reputation management system. I mean, not to get too much in the weeds, but the idea here is, because I've been playing around with how to implement this, you have an escrow system. Somebody's buying a product, you know, you're buying directly from a farm or whatever, you both put money in escrow, and then, you know, the farmer ships you the products, which, by the way, you can get this from Polyface Farms. We actually just ordered a turkey from Polyface Farms. So it's a perfect example of this. I mean, increasingly, it would be nice to do local, but I mean, as you said earlier on, depending upon where you live, local may not be all that great. This is one of the things that there's so many people that are focused on local, and I'm kind of like, actually, why don't we create decentralized global marketplaces? Why should we be just dealing with whatever is local? Like that, there's no reason for that. We can actually have something better than we have today. It doesn't have to be we're all going back to this local thing or bust. So we order food from Polyface Farms, and they're based in Virginia. And, you know, so you could imagine having a marketplace where it's like, all right, I'm getting my raw milk from, you know, this Amish farm or whatever in Pennsylvania. I'm getting my grass-fed meat from Polyface Farms in Virginia. And then if people are using these escrow systems, you can actually use the escrow system itself as a way of building a reputation management system, because you know that these are transactions that actually went through an escrow agreement. So what you're rating is somebody who's actually engaged in a transaction that actually used one of these escrow agreements. So there absolutely are solutions out there. And next year is the year of rolling all of this out immediately. I've been building to this for a while. And as you and I have discussed, and if you've been watching the podcast, I've been building a whole bunch of different solutions, and it's all out next year. What I've been saying since 2023 is that realistically, the way out of all of this, the number one thing that we can do, because of course they're going to try to shut it down. The way to shut this down is to stop using the dollar. The reason that they have leverage over all of these markets is because they control the issuance of the currency. As I said when I ran for president, if 2 to 3% of the population stop using the dollar, they're crushed because their system assumes and requires complete compliance. Their control mechanism, as you used the example of the Canadian truckers, is the money itself. So if we actually are serious about stopping the technocrats, and so many people get fatalistic about it, we could stop them tomorrow. All it would require people doing is, stop paying your credit, stop paying the bank and pull your money out. I mean, this would happen instantly because the banks are already at an extreme level of distress. So anyway, sorry about that. I'm going to Florida tomorrow. I think I mentioned this before. Depression and I've confirmed it actually is genetic. It's a genetic thing, I mean, I look pale. I have been spending too much time in front of the computer, so I'm gonna spend a lot of time. Even the blue blocker glasses are not enough. So I'm gonna get a ton of sun over the next week. I'll still be doing stuff, but I'm gonna actually get some sun. But in any event, this is completely doable, building this marketplace. But the key to the success of this is people have to understand they need to act now. If we sit here and say, well, what if they shut this down and so we're never going to start? Understand we've got the big four in beef. Maybe that'll become the big three. Maybe that'll become the big two. This is the same thing is going to happen with the consolidation of banks. The default situation when you study any of these industries is everything is moving towards consolidation. Everything is moving towards AI surveillance. Everything is moving towards tracking. That is the default case. There's no it's not static. There's not, well, it is where it is right now. And of course, most people aren't aware of how bad it is right now, but it's not staying static. It's moving in one direction. So in order to stop it from moving in that direction, we have to move in a different direction. And we can do that immediately, but there's no point in being fearful about it because once you realize that the default is that you're in a digital prison, then you really don't have anything to lose. It's a matter of making people aware of truly how bad the default is. And then hopefully that will get people over the fear because it's kind of like, wow, this is kind of a Hail Mary anyway. I need to do this or I'm absolutely going to be trapped. I want to add one other thing. I put a link in the comments to an article that I wrote. I'd forgotten about this article. It was one of the first articles I wrote for the Brownstone Institute. And I remember there's this whole thing about everybody was talking about Klaus Schwab and everything else. And I did some digging and found out the United States taxpayer has contributed $60 million to the WEF. Now, that may come as a surprise to a lot of you. The other thing that might be surprising to you is to find out that 56% of that money came under the State Department under Trump and only 44% under Obama. So the largest WEF contribution for all of you that think that Trump is defeating the globalists, we literally gave them over $30 million. And now where did that money go? Here's the kicker. The taxpayers funded WEF programs that centralize the control over African agriculture and global trade. So the WEF has been key. And when you dig into the WEF, the World Bank and the IMF, what you find is that they are doing massive consolidation right now in developing nations and already trying to standardize agricultural practices. So the thing that we saw with whatever the Dutch farmers and the thing that was going on in Europe, that is already the default that these multinational NGOs and so forth have actually been pushing on the developing nations. So they're going to be ahead of the curve in terms of consolidation. So anyway, I wanted to point that out because I'd forgotten about that. And then in the context of, well, is this actually a global thing? It's literally a global thing. Our tax dollars have literally gone to the WEF for the purpose of centralizing agriculture in Africa. And I'm pretty sure almost no one knows anything about that.
Yeah. Well, not to get off topic, but I was doing some research this weekend, and I hit the absolute mother load on, the evolution of, the tokenization and central banks and the coordination that's going on. It's just at that point, Aaron, when I saw that and I started laying out these parallel time frames and looking at, there's no way that this is a coincidence and this is just happening. This isn't. And so the point here with this, I think what's great about this industry is you have very motivated groups of people, and their it's what's the right word? The heritage is there, right? You have the American citizen, right? Should be supporting the ranchers, right? The ranchers should be very willing to provide good quality to the consumers. And somehow everything in between there has gotten messed up. Pretty much, not everything, not maybe the grocery stores as much, but there's, again, not all the processors and so forth, but a lot of the stuff in the middle, again, 80 to 85% of it in the middle has gotten messed up. And so, as human beings, sometimes we need the carrot, sometimes we need the stick, on ourselves rather than letting someone else put the carrot and the stick on us. And this is, this is a microcosm, I think, for where things will go. Okay. We're, like we talked at the beginning, the 85% down the pathway. How far are we? Are there lights on the dashboard blinking red? And I think this is a perfect case in point where, the ranchers, even though they're at record high prices, Aaron, right? I wish I could show the chart. Maybe, maybe I can. I think I can, right? I think I can show this. Let me see if I can pull this chart up, because they're at record high prices and they're still ready to go out of business. Yeah, here, let me see if I can show this. There we go. So this is the cattle market. This right here is the live cattle market. All right. From 1970. Let me see if I can blow this up just a little bit more so people can see it better. There we go. Okay. So here we go. Here we are through the 1970s is purple. The black is the price action, right? So again, we got 1976 where the data picks up. Market goes sideways for a long period of time, all the way from like let's say 1980. Remember, we talked about the 1960 to the 1980 when, they started making that big investment in, this mainline production. Okay. Getting away from the independent ranchers and really going into the beginning of the process that led to these big four. All right. Maybe it was the big 20, then it was the big 12, then the big 8, then the big 4. So we get this long period of time where the price is sideways all the way into October 2003. It bumps up just a little bit. And then we get to this point, like February of, again, post 2008. And there's so much, Aaron. I don't know. This weekend, it just rang a bell with me too. Some of the work I was doing post 2008, a lot of stuff changed on this tokenization front, right? I mean, everything went into overdrive after the 2008 real estate crisis. And that's what we get here, right? We get this big move up in the live cattle pricing all the way up into 2014. They get a spike high, comes back down, goes sideways again for a period of time. And then here we get post COVID. Okay. We get this, the live cattle market just goes through the roof. So they're at record highs here. The problem is they're still ready to go out of business. And that's a problem. If you can't, it just tells you they're getting squeezed more and more and more. They're at record highs. They should be making a profit. They're actually more and more of them are ready to go out of business because they're under that much pressure. And this to me is a microcosm for where all this stuff is headed. No matter what space we move into, this is the future. So we should be motivated, like Aaron said, to do something about it. The problem is we just got to build the exchange where this can happen, where again, the consumer can find the producer and the producer can find the consumer. That we do that and we keep it private. And, and again, the DOJ, they're not going to do anything as it is now. Blondie's not going to do anything. The Department of Justice is doing nothing on this. Again, at what point should they have done something? At 30%, 60%, 80%, 90%, they're not going to do anything. So the point is we just have to go take it off their radar and just get around them because they're not going to protect us. They're not going to protect either ends of the spectrum. They're only going to protect what's in the middle. And it's just obvious that that's the case, right? So I think that this is it's just an example of how things can go wrong, but it's also, to me, a good representation. It's easy to get your arms around. It's front and center. It's in the news right now. Everybody's paying the higher prices. So it's something we should feel. The question is, what can we do about it? And can we spread the word once we get an opportunity to build some kind of an exchange where people can bypass this ruinous system that we're in right now?
Yep. So I would say to everyone, stay tuned. So this is the first of what will inevitably be a multi-part series where we're exploring technocracy and agriculture, as well as solutions. So I think this was a good intro, good overview. And so thank you for coming on for that. And I think we've got a great start. I'm going to bring on Courtney and Patrick now. And unless you have any final comments before we transition over.
No, I think we're good. Thanks, Aaron.
Great. Awesome. Talk to you soon.
Okay. Bye.
Thanks. Bye. Hey, Courtney. Hey, Patrick. How are you?
Hey.
Hey, we have the whole Technocracy Roundtable crew here.
I know we do. We have the whole round. This entire week is nothing but technocracy, which is great. Very, very important. So thank you both for coming on. I'm very excited about the opportunity to talk to you guys today and always, but in particular, I've finished the book, and as I've said many times on every podcast since I started reading it, this is a book that everyone should go out and immediately buy, and bring to the holidays and get some for friends and family. This is what you should be talking about over the holidays, truly, because these are the most important topics. And this book does a phenomenal job of encapsulating, essentially 90 years of what's been going on in building, but in a way that's succinct, understandable, and completely relevant based on what we're witnessing and experiencing day to day. So I encourage people to buy it. I put the link in the comments. I certainly will send another link around. You can get it on Amazon. You can buy it at technocracy.news. So just as a preface, I urge everyone to consider buying it now and getting it as soon as you can, because it really is that important of a book.
I appreciate that. We tried very hard to condense everything down. As Courtney will tell you, I beat her up all the time. Get it shorter. So
Not my strong suit, but it was a good challenge.
It was okay. It worked out because we boiled it down to about probably 120 pages of readable text.
Yeah.
That was really an incredible achievement, in my opinion, because we could have waxed eloquent all over the place. Yeah. But that's not what people want and need right now. They need short, easy to read stuff. Get to the point. Don't overdo it. And I think we've really hit a home run at this point.
Part of the challenge was that it's happening so fast. We kept like messaging each other like, wait, do we need to add this? Do we need to add this? Like, this just happened. Wait, do we add this? It was hard to keep up.
Well, no, as an example, I was when I was reading this, so there was a section in there talking about how, RFK is pushing wearables as a potential solution so that we won't have to pay for a more expensive Ozempic. And apparently instead we're going to be using the wearables to track the effectiveness of the government-sponsored Ozempic. So,
I know. Yeah. As a programmer, I'm sure you will appreciate. I used to be in the programming business. I had a development firm in the 90s and early 2000s, and we used to say the only way to stop a software developer, that's a creative guy, right? Programming is art, they say, or poetry. It really is in some ways. But the only way to stop a programmer is to break his fingers.
Very true. That is very true. Of course, now you can just speak into it. You don't even need your fingers anymore.
I know.
That is true. Yeah.
Well, before we get into this, I should probably introduce you guys, or if you wouldn't mind introducing yourselves. I know my audience is probably already familiar with this, but hopefully there's some new people watching. So if you wouldn't mind giving a quick intro before we get into the book.
Courtney.
Sure. I'm Courtney Turner. I'm the host of the Courtney Turner podcast. I co-authored this book, The Final Betrayal, A Cautionary Tale, How Technocracy Destroyed America. Although hopefully maybe we can stop that destruction. That was the aim. And I also host the Dangerous Dames. I just finished that with Dr. Lee Merritt. And I have a Substack as well, so I do quite a bit of writing, not as often as I'd like because brevity is not my strong suit. So they tend to be tomes as far as articles go. Like the average is around like 10,000 something worth usually. So yeah.
And I'm the old guy, right? I started this whole mess in the first place, probably even back in the 70s. But fast forward, I was the first guy that mentioned Technocracy about 15 plus years ago, and I've been talking about Technocracy ever since. I have written 3 books before this one. This is maybe the final book. I don't know. There might be one more, but how much do you have to say to convince people that you're really onto something here? Well, we've been discussing that for a long time, I guess. But I'm excited to see what's happening today with all the discussion about technocracy. This is our time has come. That's all I can say. And you some of your people would probably recognize or remember the documentary that was released a few weeks ago, maybe 5 weeks ago or so. There was the first full-blown technocracy documentary in the world. It originated in Europe, actually in the UK. Sorry, don't want to offend anybody in the UK, but this came out of the UK. And today, I just got a notice from the publisher that they've just crossed 1 million views on YouTube. Yeah. Yes. This is amazing video, but people are obviously they're getting it. They're passing it around. They're listening to it more than one time. This is amazing accomplishment. So I'm really, really glad that people are starting to perk their ears up at this point.
Yeah.
That is very exciting. And I mean, I know when I found your work, I immediately it made sense of the world in a way that otherwise didn't make sense. And, so people are sitting around, oh, it's this group. Everybody's like bouncing back and forth and no one really has any idea what's going on. And you've been putting together this information for years. And once you see it, you can't unsee it, which is why I've been telling everybody, and early on, people are like, Technocracy, are you sure this is it? And I'm like, yeah, I'm not going to move. You may find this to be uncomfortable. You may like the fact that, Peter Thiel and Elon Musk are not the heroes, are not the Avengers in this story, but it is what it is. And it's very clear and it's historical and it's been going on for almost a century. And so I'm glad people are starting to see it. But based on the title of the book itself, though, Final Betrayal, that it tends to suggest that we don't have a lot of time.
Isn't that the truth?
Yes. Yes. Anyway, it's in past tense. So yeah.
I'm really picking up on the trend today, even the last month, where people are openly expressing their dismay post the election. The election was on November 2, 2024. Now it's November 17. And that's 1 year plus. People are getting the idea, something is really wrong here. And this is not just standard breaking of promises. That's always been on the table. Every politician does that. They say stuff, then they don't do it. Okay, this is not that. This is something way beyond that. This is a master betrayal of trust all across the board. I don't care if you're a Republican or a Democrat, doesn't matter. You've all been betrayed in the worst treacherous way that you can imagine. I'll just leave it at that. Courtney can fill in some blanks here.
Yeah, I think, certainly this is like coming to, a big reveal at this point. And both of you talked about the past century. I would argue these ideas go way, way back. I often talk about the philosophical and kind of spiritual underpinnings of things, and certainly we're seeing, and we outlined it in the book, this dark enlightenment philosophy is really undergirding much of this betrayal, because they have such a strong influence on the Trump administration currently. But this idea of creating some sort of a simulacra, I think goes back really millennia, but they didn't have the technology to do so, right? So for those who aren't familiar with the term simulacra, this is just like the best way to think of it is like you have a strawberry, which is, comes from nature, from God's creation, right out of the earth, and it's a real thing, and it's got nutrients, and it's delicious. And then maybe you make strawberry juice, you squeeze it out, you get some of the juice, maybe a little pulp, and it's still got the strawberry in it. It's made from the real thing. Then we want to make candy sells, and we can, really abundant, and but it doesn't have any strawberry in it. You might call it strawberry. It's like strawberry flavor. It's got the essence of strawberry, but it's not actually strawberry anymore. And I see very much that it's this idea of they want to play God, where they are the architects of reality. And newsflash, that's not how things work. I personally believe there is a reality, and we don't create it. So I don't think it's going to end well, but that's very much what we're seeing is this, millennia old kind of battle between, those who want to maintain some sort of creator distinction and respect for for the creation and creator, and those who think that their way is better. And in terms of what's going on with the Dark Enlightenment, it's such an assault on America. Because, I know there's lots of complaints, and certainly we've been on a very, bad path for a very long time. And we don't need to go through, the evidence is quite plentiful. But this concept is such an assault on everything this country was founded upon. This philosophy, this idea that we're going to create a for-profit type of CEO monarchy. And all of us have talked about this quite extensively, but now it's really coming to where you can see not just the ideas, but you can see how they're implementing it and how it's actually affecting policy. And that's really concerning, because because they do have the technology to do it. I mean, they can make, Nick Land's GovCorp and technoplastic beings and the hyperstition, all of it. They can make it a reality now. They have the means to do it. The complete, he talks about a concept called deterritorialization. It comes out of Guattari and Deleuze, but it's this idea of being completely removed from the environment. And with the technology, they can do that. They can create this completely artificial world where, as Yarvin says, we become virtualized beings, because that's, of course, the humane alternative to genocide.
We probably should talk about the movie The Matrix a little bit, because that was the first time that the concept of a simulacra was introduced to society, if you will. Yeah. And that was based on Bulliard's work. He didn't like the movie actually, but nevertheless, it stuck. Too bad for him. He brought it up in the first place. But in the first scene of the Matrix movie, you'll see his book, a little green book. It was they call it an Easter egg, where it shows the title of the book. He opened the book and he pulled out some, I forget what it was, a CD or something, and he gave it to some guy to knocking on the door. But that's what set the stage for the movie, The Matrix. And when you consider what The Matrix was all about, it was projected, there was a reality projected that didn't exist, and people believed that it did. They thought they were in some type of a world, taste things, you could feel things, you could whatever, move around, travel, but all those things did not exist. And the fact was, there was another reality behind the whole thing that people never saw because it was hidden from them intentionally. This is kind of what we're dealing with today. There is a reality going on that people are being convinced, or are convinced, I'll say, they are convinced that this is the reality that's going on. They see shadows of things that they vaguely remember something maybe connected in the past, but not really. This is how simulacra gets a hold of you. And all of a sudden you realize you're just absolutely divorced from reality altogether. Why do I mention this is important in the first place? Well, a few years ago, when after I had my stroke, I had a lot of time to think. You might imagine you can't do anything else except think, right? Because you can't speak, you can't move, whatever. You get lots of time to think. I understood that there was going to be a collapse of reality at some point in the future, based on this concept of this simulacra taking over society and convincing people there's another reality, but then it produces a collapse of reality in the end. Just today, I saw a video on YouTube by a psychiatrist who didn't believe in AI psychosis until just recently, when he discovered some evidence that pointed to it. And the idea of AI psychosis at this point is apparently AI is now convincing people there's another reality that's not true, but there's another reality, and they're getting sucked into it to the point they're becoming psychotic. That's when you have a break with reality. Psychosis. That's not a diagnosis, by the way. It's just a symptom. When you're psychotic, you had a break with reality. Now, if you go to a psych or a shrink, they'll tell you why that happened to you. There might be other causes, but nevertheless, psychosis is a very dangerous place to be, because it's like a pilot flying through a fog bank and he doesn't have his instruments all of a sudden. It's just, you don't know where you're going. You're going to hit a mountain, and they'll never find you again. So when I discovered the mission, or the trajectory of this business of psychosis, break with reality, we're seeing it all over the world now, especially in America. We see it all over the landscape, and people are just saying things that are off the wall. They have no clue what they're talking about at this point. We're in such a dangerous situation. I just can't believe that it's actually come to this point, but it was probably predicted. You could have predicted it years ago where we would end up, but here we are today.
Yeah, and this whole this psychosis, this break with reality, right? Huxley would talk about this all the time with psychedelic experiences, right? You get that transcendent kind of experience, and you blur the distinction between what's real and what's not, but you think that you've ascended. And so now they're using technology to replicate these types of experiences, right? Peter Thiel has his Prospera, where it used to be called Vitalia, but now the subsidiary is called Infinita. And Vitalia, interestingly enough, the tagline on the website was "a city where death is optional." So they're doing all of these transhuman experiments, and one of them is where they have a headset, like a VR headset, to give them the experience of taking a psychedelic, and so they can have these transcendent experiences. And now AI is creating that for them, so they're not going to need it. But they've conditioned people with the drugs and with all of these other types of modalities, so we can live in Huxley's Brave New World and take our soma daily. Just exit into the AI virtual reality.
Isn't it interesting that Huxley wrote his book, Brave New World, in 1932, the same year that Technocracy was at Columbia University, being created at that point, crystallized, I would say. Crystallized. They were writing down all the facts at that point in a major university, Columbia University. And that book popped out. I've been convinced for a long time that was no mistake. It wasn't a coincidence, because the president of Colombia spent a lot of time in the UK as well as in Europe hobnobbing with the elite there. Certainly he would have blabbed his idea all over Europe, probably trying to sell it, but make himself look good. But then the whole movement got thrown out. But nevertheless, by the time the book came out, that's in history now, so that you can read this book. If anybody can get that book for $2 at a used bookstore, get it, read it. It's short read. Mm-hmm. This is the heartbeat of technocracy. It's absolutely positively based on technocracy. There's no political system there. It's basically a controlled society.
Caste system.
From the brainiacs on down, and you can just look at that where we're going today and say, "Wow, did he get it right or what?"
Yeah, and his brother Julian. I mean, he's definitely a technocrat, and he authored the book with H.G. Wells, and H.G. Wells was trained by Thomas Henry Huxley, who was Darwin's bulldog, or called himself Darwin's bulldog. And Julian actually wrote the mission statement for UNESCO, and it was literally a eugenics mission statement.
He created UNESCO, and he totally involved in the eugenics movement. Totally.
Yeah.
Wow. What a snake.
Yeah, no, Julian Huxley is bad news. Yeah, I always wondered if who was driving the ship, who put together the playbook. But I wrote about Julian Huxley quite a bit in my book as well. I mean, when you look at the whole origins of the UN, I mean, this was always about global government. This was always about moving towards technocracy. It's not a conspiracy theory. It's like part of the foundational documents. And it's amazing that people now think it's a conspiracy theory, where it's like, just why don't you go look at the founding documents, look at what they were discussing and describing at the time, look at the League of Nations before it. And it's fascinating to look at, just because it's there in black and white. You don't need to speculate about it. You can use their own words, their own texts, and their own videos.
Well, and the whole education system, which is to breed global citizens in a technocratic machine, right? A global technocratic machine. And that is all predicated on Alice Bailey. And Alice Bailey, right, she read The Education in the New Age, her externalization of the hierarchy. She lays out the 10-step plan for the New World Order. People say that's a conspiracy theory. You can go look at it. It's right online. I mean, it's on the Lucius Trust website, right? You can go pull it off, and it's pretty easy to search for. Like, you don't even have to read all 24 books to get it. Like, you can do a very quick search and pull it right up. So, and that was what Robert Mueller predicated his World Core curriculum on, which is, again, it is a whole curriculum to breed these global citizens in a technocratic machine, where they're cogs in this machine. And that was predicated on the works of Alice Bailey. He wrote about it in his 2,000 ideas that became 4,000 ideas. I don't know, it might have become 7,000. He fancied himself quite the visionary. But
well, I was just going to say, this is a little bit off topic, but I think Philip K. Dick gave a really interesting talk. I think he was in France or somewhere at some point, where he suggested that, maybe this is an artificial reality that we're in right now. Maybe we're already one layer deep into it. I went into a Philip K. Dick thing for a while and read all of his stuff. He's an interesting character and certainly has some very interesting works out there. But I know we've talked about this before, but as I'm talking to people, I will say, I always bring up Curtis Yarvin. And what I'm hearing a lot now is, I've heard his name a lot. I should really look into it. They haven't looked into it. They haven't looked into it yet, but at least it's starting to make some kind of noise out there. But can you explain, just in a real high level overview, who Yarvin is and what story he plays in all of this?
Let me just, I'm let Courtney do that, but let me just tell you, before November 2nd, I guarantee you, nobody, maybe 1 in 10,000 people ever heard the name Curtis Yarvin, much less his philosophy, called Dark Enlightenment. We saw a preview of that when Elon Musk trotted out on the stage with a Trump rally and had a black hat on. He says, he had MAGA on it, MAGA, and he said, I'm dark Gothic MAGA. And everybody cheered, yay, Elon, I'm, dark MAGA forever. They didn't have a clue what they're saying, but pick it up here. I just tell you, nobody knows, it didn't have a clue at that point what was going on. Nobody. This is why I call it the Great Betrayal, and the final one too.
Yeah, unfortunately, I saw a clip on CNN that kind of summed it up, where they were saying how there's this guy, his name is Curtis Yarvin. He's been blogging for like over a decade, but now it's really important because he has such a strong influence on the Trump administration. And I'm sitting here thinking, he's been blogging since 2007. It's almost 2 decades. I mean, we're about to get into 2026 here, but who's counting? Apparently not you. You haven't been paying attention at all. So yeah, he started blogging in 2007, his blog, Unqualified Reservations, and it's quite extensive. He's now blogging under Gray Mirror on his Substack, and I don't really know what Gray Mirror. It just reminds me of Black Mirror, and I do think there's probably some sort of a connection there, but I don't know. And he went under the pseudonym Mencius Molebug, and I have a couple of theories on why, but he's never disclosed why he goes by Mencius Molebug, but that's his name. So Curtis Yarvin, writing under Mencius Molebug, this Unqualified Reservations, and he's a very far right character. Although, I mean, I don't really think there's anything kind of conservative. I wouldn't really even say he's a right wing, but that's how they classify him, as very far right. And the term dark enlightenment was actually coined by Nick Land, who even less people knew about, but now, because of the Tucker episode, a lot more people are familiarizing themselves with Nick Land. And Nick Land's Dark Enlightenment book that he wrote in 2012 is pretty much a footnote to Curtis Yarvin. The entire book is pretty much just quotes from Curtis Yarvin. But Nick Land has been developing these ideas for even longer, since the early 90s, out of something called the CCRU, the Cybernetic Culture Research Unit, which was a part of the philosophy department at Warwick University. He created this division with his partner, Sadie Plant, who was a cyberpunk feminist. And he really developed the concept of accelerationism. So accelerationism could kind of be summed up. It's, more extensive than this, but it could be summed up with Mark Zuckerberg's whole philosophy of, move fast and break things. And if you're not breaking things, you're not moving fast enough. That's pretty much their philosophy. But Nick Land had this idea that capitalism is this alien force. It's an inhuman force that's going to reach some sort of apocalyptic state. And so we need to use technology to push it to its nth degree so that we reach the apocalypse faster. A lot of these people have this very kind of apocalyptic end times. I mean, you hear from Peter Thiel, it's a different variation, but it's the same kind of concept that they're using. And so he believes that we need to use technology, so that we can reach this apocalyptic state that capitalism is doomed to reach anyway. And built upon that is this dark enlightenment concept. So we're going to harness capitalism, and we're going to have dissolutions of a complete, geographical nation states in favor of these kind of what they call, Nick Land calls it GovCorp, which is government corporations, and Curtis Yarvin calls them SovCorps, which is sovereign corporations. But essentially, we'll have a CEO who runs things like a monarchy. He's basically going to be the king of a startup, and it's going to be a for-profit kind of organization. So we are now consumers and customers in this corporation, and it's no longer a nation state. But Curtis Yarvin, he's been writing these ideas. He pretty much has everything is couched in this left-right dialectic for him. It's all about, the left is all about power, according to him. And so we have to, take the power. The right needs to usurp the power because, of course, the way you defeat the enemy is to become the enemy. I never understand when people have these ideas. That's the best way to defeat them is you become them. But yeah, so he's, and his whole idea is that democracy is doomed to fail, and his ideas against democracy and really against the Enlightenment, right? That's why it's the dark Enlightenment. It's against the foundational principles of the Enlightenment, things like egalitarianism and liberty, and most of the positive things that came from the Enlightenment that this country is founded upon. He feels need to be completely eradicated. But he got this idea because Peter Thiel set up a salon at his home and introduced him to Herman Hoppe. And Herman Hoppe is a, anti-democratic philosopher and political philosopher. And so most of those ideas actually came from Herman Hoppe, but it was introduced by Peter Thiel. And I do think Peter Thiel helped to elevate Curtis Yarvin because Peter Thiel invested in his Urbit, which is, his basically network state concept through his company Tlon. And then he's got this other concept. I won't go through everything, but I'll go through one more. He's got this other concept that, the cathedral. So, everything is, again, left and right. So the left has infiltrated all the institutions. And now there's some truth to this, right? The academia and the media and, the entertainment industry have been captured, he feels. And he calls this the cathedral. And so he says that because there's nothing we can do about that. They're already captured. And so we have to move into this neo-cameralist kind of a society where everything is run as a SovCorp instead. So, yeah, I'll leave it at that. But
so I have some thoughts about this. I mean, related to the fact that this is the final betrayal, because I was warning people about this as I'm sure you guys were as well before the election. When Musk was talking about Doge and everything else. And when it comes to this betrayal, so to me, I think that a lot of people bought into, on the Doge side, the idea that Doge is about efficiency. And if Doge is going to come in and we're going to save money, which is really important because at the time we only had a $37 trillion debt, but that this is exactly what we need. It's us versus the deep state and the administrative state. And finally, people are going to come in and take care of this. And so you mentioned Rage, retire all government employees, Doge. So you have a lot of people that are conservatives, even libertarian-ish. I mean, the libertarian wing, I guess, Liberty Republicans call it, that I believe we're approaching this from the standpoint of this is a populist uprising, the outcome of which will be we're going to fix the bureaucracy and restore the Constitution. And my belief is that that's what the promise was, and that's what a lot of people signed up for, which is completely different than what Yarvin is about. And my view has been their approach is this is what we're talking about here isn't removing bureaucracy, it's replacing the bureaucracy with technocracy. And this is an interim step. And in essence, what we're going to do is we're going to try to embolden and empower the executive as a glide path to technocracy. In my view, this is what I see is am I off on this perception of the betrayal?
Nope. I think you got it pretty good. I'll tell you what, the glide path has been very distinct for at least almost 100 years. And when the plane just isn't descending necessarily, you don't sense what's going on. But all of a sudden, when it takes a nosedive, you really start to pay attention. Do you need to reach for the oxygen mask, for instance? We've seen this whole thing has been in writing on the books, if you will, for decades and decades. Let me give you an example. The Marxists hated the technocrats in the 1930s with a passion. I'll read you a part of an article. And they would war with each other because the technocrats had no use for them either. technocrats didn't like anybody, basically. They hated all politicians and all capitalism. That was evident. But when the Marxists of that day, there was a big communist movement back then in the 30s and the 40s, huge, actually, bigger than technocracy. When they got wind what technocracy was all about, they flipped out. And they began to write about them with passion. You can't do that. We do not want you on the scene at all. You technocrats, get lost. Basically, let me summarize the whole argument with one short paragraph here. That this article appeared. I have to set this up there. This article appeared in the monthly organ of revolutionary Marxism. The magazine was called the New International, right? And that was the official publication. They wrote an article in 1944, and this is one of the statements that they made. Actually, I wrote two articles. I published them when I ran across them, I published them on Technocracy News. This is what they said. Where the economic analyst notes the development of this type of chronic unemployment, Scott, that's Howard Scott, the founder of the Technocracy movement, Howard Scott records nothing less than the abolition of human labor. One of the fundamental tenets of technocracy is that labor has become non-essential to society. 1934, 1933, 1944. Really? It goes on. Technology has swept away the human worker. That was when the Marxists got that in their craw. They would have put them out of business. They couldn't exist without humans and labor, right? Well, what do we see today? Rage, for instance, replace all government workers. Oh yeah. How about all the people have been just fired by the thousands in this last quarter? I counted something over 150,000, 175,000 people right now from big companies. What's going on there? Well, the human worker, wait for the robots. Oh gosh, wait for the robots. They're coming. They're coming. You can hear them.
Oh,
thump, 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 thump.
So you're talking about, this is 1934. One of the other things that was shocking to me in looking at the original paperwork on this is that a cornerstone of technocracy is the idea that you replace the price-based system with an energy credit system.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So with what you just said about, well, we'll be in a post-labor economy and we'll have an energy credit system. Let's look at what Elon Musk has said in the last 72 hours. This is critical. I think the biggest resistance point I get with this is that people don't want to believe that Musk is anything other than a
hero. Hero.
Musk has stated explicitly that we're moving towards an era where we're not going to need money anymore, where the currency will be, in his words, were wattage. He has stated that we are going to be replacing labor, and we're not going to have just universal basic income. It's going to be universal, amazing, higher income. And now, if you commit a crime, rather than going to prison, you're going to have a robot following you around. I think it's critical. So this is what you have to understand. There are these documents from the 1930s. This is an ideology, and literally Musk is parroting it word for word right now. And the system doesn't appreciate individual rights or property rights or free will. That has to be understood.
Yes, it does. And you have to mention, of course, that Elon Musk's grandfather was the head of technocracy in Canada for all those years in the late 30s and the 40s. He bailed out eventually and went to South Africa. But, Elon
he started the social credit party first, though.
That's right. You're right. Yep. So you have to give Elon credit, I guess, to pick up his family history and move forward with it. There's nothing new under the sun here at all.
Yeah, I do want to address the whole the Marxism, because the technocrats were aligned with the Nazis, and this is what you see constantly, right? The fascists and the communists are always fighting each other. But what I'm seeing right now culturally is that's creating the perfect storm to usher in the technocracy while they're fighting back and forth, and while they're deluding people, right? They're misleading people on what the real threat is. And I think, they didn't necessarily use those terms, but both Kissinger and Brzezinski essentially said that that's what would happen, that you would have these clash of these ideologies.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely. Brzezinski, by the way, Brzezinski was the guy that started the Trilateral Commission with David Rockefeller in the first place. They started the new international economic order. I believe this is what we have today, that this is the outgrowth of that. It was all designed to be a technocratic society. We have it today. But Brzezinski, in his book, his seminal book, I might add, Between Two Ages, America's Role in the Technocratic Era, he said, basically, I'll paraphrase, but he basically said, Marxism is a necessary stepping stone to get to the technocratic era. That was the gist of his theory. He was not a Marxist at all. In fact, he hated Marxists. He hated communists as well. But the concept of using Marxism and its ideations as a hammer to destroy everything else, to make way for technocracy, that makes perfect sense to him. At that point, that's exactly what he said. Marxism is going to be a necessary stepping stone to what we have today. And isn't that true? Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And so I got a copy of the Technocracy.
Oh, yes. Good for you.
And on page 238 to 240, they talk about the energy certificates. I won't read the whole thing. But this last line, he says, tabulation of the information contained on the canceled energy certificate day by day provides a complete record of distribution, or a public rate of consumption by commodity, by sex, by regional division, by occupation, by age group. With this information clearing continuously to a central headquarters, we have a case exactly analogous to the control panel of a power plant, or the bridge of an ocean liner, or the meter panel of a modern plane. In the case of a steam plant, the modern panel records continuously the steam pressure of the boilers, the fuel record, the voltage and kilowatt output of the generator, and all other similar pertinent data. It goes on, but I mean, that's exactly what they're doing today. I mean, that's what all this data collection is.
Well, so this speaks to something, that also fits into this category of betrayal to me, which is that I think a lot of people ascribe this idea that Trump is somehow playing 5D chess and so forth. And I don't think Trump is playing 5D chess. I don't think Trump is driving this. There was a very interesting section in the book, however, about Peter Thiel. And I think people need to understand. So to put together, when you're reading something from the 1930s, and now we're looking at it 90 years later, and it's like, wow, this is actually happening verbatim. This didn't happen by accident. This happened deliberately, moving a lot of chess pieces over a very extended period of time. This is how we got here. So Trump didn't engineer this. But Peter Thiel, I believe, is playing chess. Do you guys want to talk about that and just give people like a high level overview of this? Because he's somewhat behind the scenes, but man, I'll tell you, I think he may be one of the biggest players out there.
I agree. And Courtney wrote that chapter. Hats off to her. But tell him, Courtney, what you found out.
Yeah, so he is actually a chess master. So yeah, he definitely. I think if somebody's playing 5D or 10D chess, then it's probably Peter Thiel. And it was Pat's idea to do it as like a set of rules because he has all these rules. And I think that was genius. So he's written about, like in his what is it, 0 to 1 book, he's talked about a lot of his various ideas. And so his rules that he has. And so you can see them very much like he's, doesn't believe in competition. Most people don't believe in competition. You think they're thinking, like omni win, win, win. But no, he means you have to dominate. He does not enter into anything unless he's sure that he's going to have a complete monopoly over it. And we see that with every company he's ever done. I think, a lot of people call Trump a kingmaker. I would argue Peter Thiel is a kingmaker. And we certainly see this with Vance. I think he put in one of the largest sums into any kind of a race. And it was his Senate race. $15 million is a tremendous amount just for somebody's Senate race. I really think he's behind Curtis Yarvin. I think there's other forces behind Yarvin as well. Somebody in your chat was saying the captured left is the communists still being directed by Russia, who is Curtis Yarvin is working for. I actually think that there might be some truth to that, quite honestly. He's aligned with a lot of those forces. That doesn't mean that the, technocracy isn't the goal, just as you just said, Brzezinski had, stated. And I do think so, but it still would behoove them to have America fall to this kind of a system, which, would give them some sort of leverage. And it's aligned in a lot of other ways. And you see this with now Nick Land is doing the whole circuit constantly with Alexander Dugin. I mean, if that doesn't indicate any alarm bells to anyone, it probably should. But yeah, I think he's very much the architect of a lot of what we're seeing currently. You sent an interesting article today, which I didn't have a chance to read yet, about his mentor, because a lot of people say that to me all the time. They're like, well, you think that Peter Thiel is the, the king puppet master. And I don't. I have a lot of, speculation about who is pulling strings on him. But I always say that, when you start dealing in the speculative realm, you can't cut those strings because you can't see them. So I like to deal with things that we have personal agency, and the strings that we can see, we have a chance to possibly cut. So that's really the realm I like to deal with, because people are so far removed from reality anyway. And people get caught up in a lot of salacious type of speculation. I'm not saying there's no merit to any of that. We can't do anything about it. It just becomes entertainment, right? So really, when you deal with things that we can see and things that we have some agency over, and Peter Thiel, we know exactly what he's doing because he's been doing it for a very long time. So, yeah. Sorry.
Well, this is part of the point of putting together the Technocracy Atlas, is that we can start to actually map all of this, because there are so many people and so many different relationships that the best way to expose it is to just diagram it. Because the article that I sent over today suggests that this guy, Gilman Louie, has some significant pull. He's in charge of InQtel, which is the CIA venture capital department. And, so I guess he's been pretty instrumental in connecting Thiel and Karp and others with the CIA and others. And so it doesn't mean, again, he's not necessarily the guy pulling the strings, but it is interesting you can follow the money and you can actually start to figure out what's going on here. And it doesn't tell a good story. I've never yet been in a situation where more information revealed positive intent and that, oh, hey, this was all just some big misunderstanding. It turns out that it doesn't usually break that way.
Exactly. We need to examine this guy, Gilman Louie, very, very carefully, because he's been a sleeper, if you will. I think
so.
He was the founder of InQtel. Hands out, hands down, everybody says that he was the guy that actually pulled the trigger. However, there was other people involved, industrialists, big-time industrialists like Lockheed Martin and industrial firms like that. So there was something going on with InQtel. Why did the CIA have to have a venture capital company in the first place? Well, when that basically, in my opinion, that was just to seed the intellectual development of technology, and it did a great job. But they could do it openly
TIA.
and just kind of bury it behind the the curtain. Well, it's just business and as usual.
TIA, the Total Information Awareness, right?
Yes.
That got shut down, but that was seeded by InQtel, and that was a lot of beta testing. And of course, I think we saw a lot of the fruits of that beta testing once after 9/11, and they executed the Patriot Act, which co-authored by Biden and was well underway for a long time, but then they had an excuse to roll it out. And that was one of the other things of one of the other rules was his secrecy. And he's really a master of that. I mean, he has this dialogue, which has been going on for 2 decades, and he managed to keep it essentially a secret society. He managed to keep it under wraps for 2 decades. I mean, most people can't do that. That's actually pretty impressive. And then his his whole Antichrist series that he did with Act 17, and he kept that. I mean, we don't have any video footage that leaked, but we do have a Washington Post article that was leaked, and there was a girl. I don't know if she's the one who leaked it to the Washington Post, but there was a girl who got kicked out midway.
Yes.
Because she was leaking. I mean, that's. A lot of people try to do things in secret. They don't have that kind of, they're not able to keep the reins on it like that. So there's something very interesting about that.
He's a very secret guy, isn't he? There's at least 2 other secret groups that he founded circa 2003 to 2005 who've been meeting ever since in secret. And all of a sudden they get outed, and then maybe they're going to move or something. But, all this stuff, where you have these arch industrialists meeting with officials from the government in secret, that bothers me to death. It really never has set with me. I don't care what they're talking about. It should always be on the table for public scrutiny. We never had that chance. This is part of the betrayal, I do believe. They had to keep it secret. Whatever they're planning, they had to keep it secret enough to where we couldn't get it, see in advance what was going to happen.
I agree. I find when they have these meetings, especially when they start inviting military, and there's a lot of those.
Yes.
Yeah, I get very worried about that.
Well, it's worrisome, but then, I mean, you can start to trace, and this goes to the final betrayal aspect of this. To me, what I've been floored by is, we have Real ID, which 60% of Americans already have, and it's digital, increase in more and more states, 12 states, I think now, 20 more coming soon. We have, the Genius Act, which is tokenizing fiat, so it's giving you digital programmable money. Worse than that is the Clarity Act. They're tokenizing all of the other assets, including our national assets, and this is tied into people like Howard Lutnick that are directly involved with the administration and are personally profiting from it. But I think the section of the book that I've found the most fascinating, just because I follow tokenization, but it's this line between the new international economic order and then what is going on globally with tokenization. And then related to this is this how that ties into Sharia law. That to me was a fascinating arc that I had not tracked that. And that kind of blew my mind. Do you want to talk about that a bit? Because I think people have no idea what the implications are here.
I know.
I'll let you take that away.
Oh boy, I'll tell you what, this is a can of worms for sure, in my opinion, because of all of the cozy going on with President Trump and all these countries in the Mideast, like Qatar. Qatar is going to establish a facility in Idaho at a military base. What? To train their own pilots, and he's soliciting. Well, actually, isn't MBS in the United States even now? I think he's on a tour to visit the president. That's the premier of Saudi Arabia, with great pomp and circumstance, I'm sure. What's going on with this cozy relationship all of a sudden? Well, most people never listen to all of the conferences going on in the Mid East with fintech, in particular, financial technologies. You know exactly what I'm talking about. Financial technology that includes blockchain and other types of payment systems and other technologies, transmission, etc. Well, the Middle East in general has stuck their flag into the fintech world because it gives them a way to process their Sharia finance system that's all asset based. They don't allow any debt in their country. That's not part of the economic system. No debt at all. So it just turns out that tokenization suits them just wonderfully. And they want to be the leader in fintech. They said this so many times over the last 5-6 years, and they're doing it right now. So what's going on with fintech in America right now with this new currency system, payment system, as well as asset-based system that's being erected right before our eyes, thanks to Trump and the tech bros. Well, it appears that the architecture that they're implementing here is compatible with the architecture of the system in Saudi Arabia, for instance, in Qatar, and the UAE. Well, are they thinking that they're going to flip from a debt-based economic system in America and flip into an asset-based system where it will loosely model perhaps, or at least be compatible with the financial system that the UAE, as for instance, is already proposing with fintech? This seems to me to be a natural, and it would also explain why President Trump has solicited all this money from them, because at some point our system is going to be compatible with theirs. Well, you have to remember they represent 1.2 billion people. That's a lot of people. So that, a major population group that's already embedded with an asset-based economic system. What would that mean from America? Well, there's lots of innuendos, but I'll tell you what, one thing that really sticks in my mind is the catchphrase that the WAF came up with before you'll own, by 2030, you'll own nothing and you'll be happy. You won't be, I don't think you'll be happy, but nevertheless, they saw the end of private property at some point in time, where the private property is going to be subverted into some other entity, maybe a sovereign wealth fund like they have in Saudi Arabia and Qatar, for instance. Maybe not, but you see these the locks, the tumblers, and the locks are kind of, you can hear them or see them, getting together, and all of a sudden, boom, something's going to click at some point.
It does seem that way. Then there is also, I looked up actually the secret groups that Thiel has been doing, and there's a connection here, because one of them, it's not very secret anymore, but it's still hard to find too much information on it, is Rockbridge.
Yes.
And right, Rockbridge is connected to 1879 Capital, Kirk and Malik, right? So there is a connection there. I'll just, before you go on with that, I'll just read them in case people are interested. There's Dialogue, which we talked about, Rockbridge, which I outlined a bit of Rockbridge also in my Phoenix Conspiracy article. There's Per Aspera Policy, which I have actually never heard of. And it's a dark money group tied to Thiel that has steered hundreds of thousands of dollars into political campaign while keeping its donors secret. According to the Kansas City Star, Thiel gave a contribution with 6 figures to Per Aspera Policy. I won't read the rest of it, but Stanford Review dinners for over 30 years. He's maintained, it sounds kind of like the Edge Foundation, right? The billionaires. He's maintained an exclusive relationship with Stanford Review, conservative student newspaper, and he co-founded it in 1987. He continues to host private dinners for the publication's editors, either at his San Francisco home or upscale venues like Sundance Steakhouse in Palo Alto. And then there's more information on that. The Leo Strauss Reading Group, which is very interesting because, he wrote that Straussian moment after it was all about 9/11. And I encourage everybody to read that. It's a pretty short essay, but it really sums up his worldview. So he's participated in his secretive Leo Strauss Reading Group, where he met Michael Anton, prominent conservative writer who later worked in the Trump administration. This intellectual circus focused on political philosopher Leo Strauss. And we're seeing this from so many of the Theo bros and the tech bros. We're seeing this Straussian influence from like the post-liberals and post-millennial crowd. Whose ideas about esoteric writing, natural law, and the tension between Athens, Jerusalem profoundly influenced Thiel's worldview. Then it goes on. I'll move on to the next one. Hereticon. I've never heard of them either. This was in 2019. Thiel's venture firm Founders Fund announced a Hereticon conference for dissenting thinkers and ideological outcasts to discuss topics banned from other conferences. The conference, held in New Orleans 2020 and later in Miami Beach, welcomed speakers banned from other tech conferences to discuss immortality, doomsday preparation, biological modification, UFOs, and drag culture. Then it goes on. And then there's, of course, the Antichrist lecture series. We talked about that. Of course, he's a member of the Bilderberg Group and has been for a very long time. And then there's the Executive Branch Club, and it wasn't founded directly by Thiel, but it's a new ultra-private club in Washington, D.C., co-founded by several figures in Thiel's orbit, including David Sachs, Chapman's, I can't remember the last name, Winklevoss Brothers, and it's located beneath Georgetown Mall. The club offers memberships costing up to $500,000. Private White House dinners. Yeah. So apparently he is a master of influence operations, is what I'm looking at here. That's what it looks like to me.
Well, I mean that's crazy. But actually, going back to the tokenization thing, so obviously our debt-based system's not working well, but the implications of tokenizing assets and then having those assets tied to Sharia law, I mean, that's not hard to do because you now have digital programmable money. And what people have not been tracking is the degree to which these sovereign wealth funds, these very same sovereign wealth funds, have been pushing the Agenda 2030 and in fact implementing Agenda 2030 using their sovereign wealth funds.
Yes, absolutely.
So when we talk about a betrayal, I think that the presentation of Trump was make America great, America first, and we're going to defeat the globalists. And the reality is, I'm just looking at this right now. I hadn't been keeping track of this. Remember how he went on this big thing where he announced all these big deals? In fact, even like yesterday, he was saying we're bringing trillions of dollars of investment to the United States. Well, let's look at where that money's coming from. $500 billion is Project Stargate, which is, OpenAI, Oracle, SoftBank. But let's not forget the UAE is a big player in that.
Oh, yes.
Saudi Arabia has announced $600 billion in investment. UAE commercial deals and acceleration, 200 billion new plus 1.4 trillion accelerated over 12 years. Qatar, $1.2 trillion. You have other Saudi Arabia, and then you have the Trump organization announcing a $500 million investment into Saudi Arabia real estate. I'm not seeing the America First aspect of this. This should be pretty frightening, though. These are big numbers. Now, by the way, whether any of this will materialize or not, because I remember he made a lot of announcements in his first term about this, and so I went back at some point and did a search and said, hey, whatever happened with that? And it turns out a very small percentage of these announced deals actually go through. But we should be worried about what is even being proposed and what the implications are and how much of this is going into AI and defense. I mean, it's and information sharing. So there's that side of it. The other thing is, I mean, as it relates to Teal, the more I dig into Palantir, the more concerning it is. And I think the more oblivious people are about it. Most people think of Palantir as, yes, they're involved with defense operations and the CIA, maybe some predictive policing. But what they've done in healthcare is a complete and total takeover. And it is not just in the United States. So here's another one that I'm going to bring up. The whole presentation of this in the context of Make America Great is we have to defeat China. And this is another big part of this. Yeah. But Operation Stargate is, these are all global technocratic companies that do business in China. So this whole idea that we have to put all of this money in and build a centralized AI model where we're going to win on the basis of AI when those same companies are working in Europe and with China makes no sense. This is the active betrayal and the scheme. And I put these memes up because I think it's going to happen. I think you're going to see propaganda that says you have to keep your thermostat up and you have to use less water and you can't mow your lawn because we have to beat the Chinese in AI. And in reality, it's benefiting these technocratic organizations. And so we need to make people aware of what's actually happening here. But Palantir has healthcare data. They have a contract for the entire UK. So they're currently building a 330 million pound contract to build a database on everyone in the UK. And now they're marrying healthcare data in the US with military information. Mm-hmm. And what they're doing, and I talk a lot about these click wrap agreements, but when you dig into this, you know, everybody say, well, my data is protected by HIPAA. Well, actually, governments and insurance companies are covered entities under HIPAA. So the people you don't want to have your data already have your data, but they're able to do these agreements where this provider has an agreement with this provider, and you do 2 hops, and now they have all of the information. And this is essentially what's going on. And Palantir is now working on a startup program for wearables companies where you can get access to the Palantir data platform for free, provided that you share your information. So Palantir is literally collecting all of the healthcare information. And there is very much a plan to use this. They're already talking about predictive modeling. They're already talking about, you know, quote, precision medicine. But this is actively going on right now. And so I've made a statement that has gotten me into a lot of trouble. And because I've made it publicly several times, you can either be MAHA or for medical freedom, but not both. What do you think about that in the context?
I'll say that. I'll join you. Absolutely. This is what's happening. It's not about freedom at all. It's about digital slavery.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree. Well, and in the name, right? So RFK Jr. said that part of MAHA is MABA, Make America Biotech Accelerate. And I keep harping on this because he actually said the quiet part out loud. I mean, he's talking about accelerationism, and that's literally in that acronym, Make America Biotech Accelerate. And this is all part of that whole wearables initiative. He explicitly said that, which is part of the Internet of Wearables, which is tied to the Internet of Things, to the Internet of Everything, which will eventually be tied to the Internet of Nanobio Things. I mean, they've laid out those plans pretty explicitly. And I also wanted to just say, when you're talking about the whole the data collection that Palantir is doing, so currently we already have this. Part of the reason why we have this whole system, this allopathic system where doctors are, you know, they look up a code and then they decide what pill to give you, is because everything is done by code, and that is all stored, right? All that data is collected. It's done through code. This is where all of your medication, all of your diagnoses, and there's a company called Maximus that does a lot, like all of Obamacare That infrastructure was done through Maximus. And so now they're moving this over into this, the wearables where Palantir is going to be collecting it. I have a feeling they will merge. And I do think that, I think through Foundry is probably going to be the lynch point where they merge. I don't know. That's my suspicion, but I do see that they will probably partner up and work together.
Yeah. You bet.
So this information has to get out there. To me, this has been something I've been talking to a lot of medical freedom people. I feel horrible about this because I even think back of some of the early people that were involved in the vaccine issue, like 40 years ago or whatever. And they ended up, the bone they were thrown was, we're going to have a vaccine liability shield. So they went thinking government was going to help, and they actually got a vaccine liability shield, which made things a lot worse. I feel like the same thing is going on in real time. The people that have really positive intentions, that had a horrible experience, either personally or with a loved one, who had the intent of pushing medical freedom and thought that, bought into this Avengers, team is going to come and do this, that now they're being complicit unknowingly in hyper accelerating this technocratic agenda. And I've been trying to figure out how to wake people up on this, because those are some of the most effective and vocal activists, and right now they've been muted because they're sitting there, and what they're being told is, well, hey, listen, it's Rome wasn't built in a day, and it's tough, and Bobby's trying to work his way through and do this and that and the other thing. And it's like, Bobby's trying to work his way through what? Meetings with Andreessen Horowitz, cutting another deal with Pfizer. It's tough to do, but I think it's imperative to do in order to stop the acceleration of technocracy in healthcare, to make this very clear distinction about what's going on.
He and Shanahan were huge proponents of AI precision medicine. And before Trump got into office, I was, trying to sound the alarm about that I was like, I love the slogan, MAHA. Who could argue with Make America Healthy Again? I started this in the medical freedom space. That's, my entree to all of this. So I was really, really passionate about it. And I'm all on board with getting rid of seed oils, getting rid of all the pesticides and the fake food and the big pharma push. You're never going to hear me argue against any of those initiatives. However, I was really concerned that the real agenda, that was kind of a smokescreen, because a lot of people are waking up to how polluted we've become, that was kind of a smokescreen for this whole AI precision medicine push. And now it looks like that's exactly what's going on.
It certainly does. Yeah, I agree. So he actually said that. Remind everybody that those words came out of his mouth.
Yes, you can see that the tweet. MABA means MAHA, Make America Healthy Again, means MABA, Make America Biotech Accelerate.
That's what he said.
And I can find the actual tweet and pull it up for people if you want.
Incredible.
Yeah, that is literally what he said. So there's no, way of dancing around it and sugarcoating it. That is the agenda. That's what he's working on. So all of this talk about things that we would, like is great, but sorry, go on. Yeah.
Well, let me just say what you just mentioned here, that, well, they say this, we'll just give it a time or whatever, any tactic that causes the delay is just subterfuge, in my opinion. I don't care what they say at this point. Forget it. Just get to the point of it, and let's, cut bait, so to speak. But this incessant delaying tactic, we've seen this for years. How many things have been buried over the years? Well, we'll just wait for it, blah, blah, and then it disappeared. And you never heard about it again. This is going on all over the health freedom movement. Yeah. And they're conned. They're conned into think, well, if we could be patient now, let the system work it out. No, it's not going to happen that way, I'm afraid.
No, and now there's another narrative forming, and the narrative forming is that, well, you have all these great people that had great intentions, but they're being gummed up internally. I saw Casey Means or Callie Means.
Yeah.
the fact that he was delivering this message, I thought was particularly humorous. But he was sitting there saying, there's an active plan to sabotage the Maha movement from within at lower levels. And I'm like,
he's behind that whole glucose monitoring, right?
I know. But this is now the new narrative, and this is the new narrative.
I'm so sorry. I just have to tell people this. They need to know this. So that glucose monitoring technology, which I'm not saying that, in some cases it could be very helpful for diabetics, and there are people, there's time and a place. However, the EMF that it releases like into your stream actually causes insulin resistance and has a direct like inverse relationship with your cortisol. So it's you're monitoring it, but you're exacerbating the problem at the same time. So sorry, just go on.
What a coincidence. You put on the blood glucose monitor and now you have a blood glucose problem. How convenient.
Yes.
But I think that the tactic here is it's almost like the whole trust the plan thing. I mean, I've come to this conclusion that, once people have been fooled so many times, it's easier to just continue to be strung along, because otherwise you have to face the fact that it was all a lie. And that's a really hard barrier for a lot of people. But but the problem is right now, these medical freedom people are they're being silent. They should be the most vocal people about wearables, about MABA, about Palantir Health. Those are the people that should be on the front lines. Those are the people that are the real activists. Those are the people that go out and protest. Those are the people that go out and do the rounds, and they're silent. And they're continuing to be silent because they're buying the next thing. And the new thing is our white hats are in there, but they just need more time, and it's sabotage. And we need their energy, and they need to, extract themselves from this and understand what's going on.
I found the quote. It's so the mission to make America healthy again, MAHA, includes MABA, Make America Biotech Accelerate. President Trump showed in his first term what happens when you unlock American science. Breakthroughs happen fast. Now we're going to do it again. We know the power of U.S. biotech. It's time to let it flourish, not tie it up in red tape, misalignment, and a process that gives edge to foreign interests and large incumbents. We're clearing the path to transform great science into real cures at lower cost and better health for the American people. Life science and biotech are at the heart of that. There you have it, folks.
So is the assumption here that Pfizer and all of these people are just going to have a 180, and all of a sudden they're going to change their outlook on what their business model is and how they operate? Is this the assumption that's being made? Like, do they have any detail on the plan on how that's going to work? No.
Yeah, it's going to work to just shove us into the digital gulag.
Yeah. That's right.
And one of the reasons that health is so central to technocracy, it's always been on the drawing board. They talked about it in the Technocracy study course. You probably have, if you read the book already, you have it there in your hand.
Yes.
You will see the part about the health of the population. They talk about it incessantly. Well, for whatever reason, they look at us as the resource, as part of the resources of the world. Well, you have cattle in the field, you have trees in the forest, you have oil pumping out of the ground, you have gold mines, and that sort of all the resources of the world. You have the animals in the forest. Well, they look at us as just as one other resource on the planet and competition with everything else. That somehow gives them the right to take over our health care, and they're obsessed with it. So when they created this doctrine, it started at the United Nations, I'm sure, but this whole business of One Health, where the ecosystem of the world is equated to the health of human beings, that wrapped everything in one tidy little bundle for them. Oh, now we can manage everything together. We can take into consideration what viruses are floating around and the food that they put in their stomachs, and You know, the things that go wrong with their immune system, all these things play in now to the health of the whole planet. This is crazy thinking, but until you see that big picture, the microcosm of MABA doesn't really make sense. But these people have another overarching goal to manage everything in the world. And we're just part of that.
Yep.
Yes, literally everything. The land,
yes.
You see every aspect of what we do. I mean, you look at the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. This is not a joke. It's not hyperbolic. It's not. It literally is the game plan. And if you don't understand that, then things look like, well, this is just, we're using technology to make things more efficient. You've got to understand the ideology here, or you're going to get lost. That's why I think it's critical that people read this book, but also dig deeper and start learning about technocracy and read Technocracy News, read Courtney's Substack, and then share that information, because it's critical. I see so many people going down rabbit holes. They have good intentions, but they're not looking at the big picture. Like, oh, well, we stopped Fauci, so I guess everything's good. And that's not an accurate assessment of what the agenda is. And it is going so fast that, I've actually summarized it. This last election was about technocracy versus technocracy with resistance versus technocracy without resistance. That was essentially what we ended up with. I don't think we thought that necessarily that was what it was going to be, but we don't have resistance now. This is the problem. All of the people think that they're working within the administration to stop something that's worse than what they think they're stopping.
Yeah.
Yes. Let me tell you, there's some glimmers of hope, green shoots, they call them, right?
Yeah.
For instance, the pushback against data centers across the country is really, really gaining steam all of a sudden. The news media is starting to pick up on the protest, and the actions of city councils across the country. And interestingly, there was a Democrat just recently that it was elected to a statewide position in the first time in 20 years in Georgia. He was elected to sit on the Public Utility Commission, and he ran on this whole business of accelerating energy costs, and people were really complaining about it because they have a lot of them in these data centers in Georgia.
Mm-hmm.
The public resonated, say, hey, this get this guy, he's a Democrat. We don't care if he can tap down our energy prices. I think we're going to see a gathering storm, if you will. Probably it's going to be good for the Democrat Party, not because Republicans at this point, they're so brain dead. They don't have a clue. They're opening their arms for these people everywhere, even in Mesa, Arizona, where we have a 100% Republican city council. And these people are just shafting us to death with data centers in the middle of the desert, where we need all our water and energy for the people who live here. They don't care a rip about us. Oh, we're just going to make all these jobs. But what a failure. So it looks to me that there could be big gains in 2026 in the midterm elections for Democrats. But if they can incite the riots, if you will, against data centers, that would really put a chink in their plans.
Yes. That would be great. Not necessarily the Democrat win, but
I know. What the big problem will be there after that's all gone. What do we do with the Democrats? Because the cycle is just going to start over again.
At least there's resistance, because again, like right now, there's absolutely no resistance, and there's not even an acknowledgement of the problem. And I've tried to talk to some Maha people, and actually they don't, when presented with it, they see the argument, but they still are holding out this white knight hope that things are going to be different.
It's crazy.
And hopefully that changes. Well, I know it's running. I don't know how much time you guys have. I know we're running up near an hour and a half here, but and I know we've got our roundtable in 2 days. But
I look forward to that.
I was going to say, so let's say you have one final book. That this isn't the final book. Let's say it's How We Stopped Technocracy in America. What does that book look like?
Boy, I don't know at this point. I see one thing that concerns people for sure: their pocketbook and their health.
Yeah.
And you mess with those, you're going to be in trouble. And you can say, well, the food budget, stuff, inflation, maybe. But if you think what's going to happen on the slippery slope from here on, capitalism is at risk of being completely wiped out at this point. That's really in the cards. If we don't do something to save it, maybe we shouldn't save it. Who knows? But that at this point, it's going to be really ugly going forward. What the protest will look like, I don't know. I really don't know. Maybe it will come into the health freedom movement. Maybe it'll be all these people who were protesting from these AI data centers that are just raising havoc in their communities and stuff. I don't know. I wish I could be more clear, but I really don't know at this point what it's going to take.
Well, I mean, I certainly don't have the crystal ball at all. And I will say I'm kind of surprised that I expect the white knight kind of mentality from some of like the Q movement. So maybe, but I don't expect that from the health freedom people. I mean, they've always been kind of anti-establishment. So suddenly the politicians are going to save them. A little strange to me. But what I always say is that I feel like the left is really good at the messaging. So they tend to do the brainwashing. They set the narratives. And then I think the right executes a lot of the plans. And that is kind of what we're seeing. So I think a lot of people have been pacified because they've been, now they think that they don't have to do anything because they bought into certain narratives. And meanwhile, things are marching forward quite quickly. In terms of what could be done, if we saw how technocracy ended, that would be great. I really do think it's I'm not a fan of Margaret Mead, but I think she was the one who said that it was a small group. Never underestimate the power of a small group of individuals to change the world, because in fact they are the only ones who ever have. And I do really think there is some truth to that. I think that people need to stop it locally. They need to be involved locally with their community. And we saw with Chaz Chop, they created their own sanctuary. I mean, it was a disaster. I'm not advocating that at all, but we saw that you could create a sanctuary zone. And I think that you can do that in reverse. We could do sanctuary zones where they push back against technocratic encroachments. And they can start with very specific kind of measures. I usually talk about it in terms of like the education and farming, because those are something I've been very active in. Unfortunately, I was active in the state level, and I realized the state is very corrupted as well. I'm not trying to discourage people from getting involved and doing whatever they can, especially if they have a voice and they can have some power. But I think if you took over a county, I mean, you'd have a lot of power, and the sheriff is supposed to be the highest law of the land, right? So, and that could have ripple effect, because a lot of time people don't do anything. They take no action because they don't think they have any power. But if they can see change actually occur, and we saw this in 2020 with the mama bears who stood up against what was happening in the schools, right? So, and they made a difference in a lot of places. So I think that that's really where the hope lies, is it's got to be individuals and then ripple out to communities, and maybe we can create some pockets of not just resistance, but like actual sanctuaries. And
I've always been a fan of a book written by Adam Smith called The Wealth of Nations. I read it when I was a young financial guy in the 70s. I probably should read it again. But he talked about the unseen hand of capitalism, but just generally free market economics.
Yep.
The unseen hand, the concept was, well, when people act in their self-interest, somehow things just seem to be worked out in the end. And it's sometimes it's a very gentle hand, sometimes it's maybe a little rough, but we should remember that the potential is there for this hand to turn into a fist, if you will, to knock some people out of society who don't belong there and in policy making positions. I don't know if that's not necessarily immediate hope, but I think I have some faith in the American people that they'll pick up on the concept, not intentionally, I'm sure, but they've never heard of Adam Smith in the first place. But I just make the point: if they ever get in sync with this principle, the unseen hand that's been guiding us for over 200 years at this point, that fist that could, or the hand could get a grip on something, the troublemakers, whatever, and cast them out of a society, and we could be maybe normalized again in some sense.
Well, I would speak to the inverse of that is exactly what's happening, right? Because when you talk about how health and their pockets are what impact them, that's because we're wired for survival, right?
Yes,
So those
yes,
two
we are.
things directly impact our survival. And people say, oh, like, yeah, our selfish needs and wants and whatnot. But no, that's actually the survival of the species. that is how we are wired. We are wired for survival of the species. So yeah, those things actually directly impact us. And when they do, and they're exploiting that. They know that. And that they know that that's why they can use those things to wield power over us, because they can use the fear of those things being taken away from us, our health and our financial security and stability, which is our livelihood, literally. So I think the reverse could be true as well. We could use that to reverse and push back.
Yep, I agree.
Yeah, and I mean, I think we can create out of it too. We can create alternatives to health. We can create alternatives for financial abundance and so forth outside of the system, which is obviously what I advocate for. But what I will say is, just as an update, which I'm sure you guys saw this, but Bitcoin is not the answer. If people, I know people are still, and I'm going to do a podcast on this on Thursday. I've tried to lay this out several times, but it is now there in black and white. There's direct email documentation showing Jeffrey Epstein directly funding the Bitcoin developers and the change from the narrative from Bitcoin as digital cash to digital gold. It is there in black and white. I wrote an article speculating. I said, here's what we know, here's what we don't know, but it looks pretty suspicious. That's now been validated. So there are a lot of people who think that if they just buy Bitcoin and hold on to Bitcoin, that somehow they're going to survive out of this situation. And that is not an effective strategy at this point. And I hope more people become aware of this. So, because if we are going to try to find some solutions, let's not go down that rabbit hole, because that is a dead end.
I would agree.
Indeed. Yeah. Let me just in closing maybe make a mention of our book and the availability of the book. I've been so frustrated with Amazon as a deliverer of printed books to me. I have another alternative publisher called Books By, but Amazon has been dragging their feet in delivering books to us as a publisher. Drives me crazy, but they say on their website, oh, you can get it if you buy it from them. You can get it in 1 or 2 days, maybe overnight in certain locations. And so they're kind of chiseling away our sales. I can't get the books in my hand. So we're actually having to drop ship a lot of books at this point when people order them from us. Wow. They'll get there eventually. And I think when the travel ban or the travel stuff, the airlines, that when that normalizes a little bit, probably will be supplied better at that point. So if anybody buys a book from Amazon, if they probably will get it in 1 or 2 days, believe it or not. If you got it from me, you're going to get it in 4 or 5 or 6, 7 days. And if you buy it from Books Buy, you'll get it eventually. But anybody in the world who wants it, they'll ship it for $5. That's a steal. Let me tell you, it really is. When somebody orders a book in Canada for $24.95, the postage is like $50.
Crazy.
What?
Yeah.
Crazy. Absolutely crazy. So, I feel for people outside of our country, but don't buy it from me if you're outside of the country, because I got to charge you a whole lot of shipping. You can get delivery from Books Buy for $5, and apparently anywhere in the world at this point. So I don't know how they do it. I don't care.
Is this books.buy?
Yes.
Am I looking at the right thing?
Patrick Wood.
Books.buy and then / Patrick Wood. No period in that, just Patrick Wood.
Okay.
Yep. So
yeah,
we'll try it. A lot of people are buying it, and some people don't. If you can believe this, some people don't like Amazon.
Wow.
I say, go for it. Go to Books Buy and buy the book there.
Yep. But Bezos started in his garage. He's the epitome of the American dream.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. The garage story gets him every time. Yeah.
That DARPA garage.
Yeah. Actually, Roger just showed me, I didn't know this, that Charlie Kirk was a part of Peter Thiel's founders. He didn't make it.
I just saw that. Yeah.
Yeah. He didn't make
Yep.
it through, but yeah, he was so yeah, he's another garage or basement story. It's a garage or a basement always, Yeah, one of those.
Yeah, whatever. That's like the Roach Motel.
Mm-hmm.
The Roaches check out, but check in, but they don't check out, sort of thing.
Yeah.
In reverse.
Yes.
Yeah.
Great. Courtney, do you have any final words?
I don't know. I think we pretty much covered it, but yeah, I hope people will get the book, and we really do try very hard to make it very brief, very accessible, but there's tons of sources, so that's actually why the book is longer than it is. So there's no shortage of leads for people if they want to go and do further research.
Yes.
Yes.
Absolutely. That we put in so many footnotes. You can't believe it. Almost in some cases, more pages of footnotes than text. But oh well.
definitely at the end. But yeah, no, I recommend it. I can't recommend it. More highly. I get it as soon as you can. Get it before the holidays.
Yes.
Like I said, I ordered a physical copy and also a Kindle version, and it's critical. It's very important, very timely, and frankly, you should get it before the holidays so that you can talk about it over the holidays.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Positively. Yep. I totally agree. And I have to say, for the first 2 weeks that we've been selling the book, when it hit the market 2 weeks ago to today, matter of fact, I'm surprised that there have been so many people who have bought more than one book from me, because I'm the only place you can get the book at a discount. If you buy 2 or 4 or 5, 10, whatever, I have a steep discount for like wholesalers even. And so people have been buying multiple books right out of the gate. That's surprising me, because I think people are so anxious that you see the title, they see the picture, they got to have at least 2 or 3 copies in their hand to give away to other people. I'm so pleased that people are picking up on this in that way.
Absolutely. And I think I do not subscribe to that mindset that you should not discuss politics or religion or taboo discussions at family gatherings. I think this is just the topic to spark some discussion.
Oh, yes.
I think that was a technocrat psyop to get people to not talk about these things.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, yeah.
All right. Well, thank you both. And so what do we? So we have the Technocracy Roundtable Wednesday at 6 p.m. Eastern, correct?
Yes, 6 Eastern. So
Yeah.
and we are going to discuss evolutionary AI and machine consciousness and where they're going with all of that. And I think that ties into, you had touched on that some people think we're already in a singularity. I personally don't believe that, but I think they want to convince us that because I think it's very much part of the PSYOP because that's where they want to go. They want to put us in the singularity.
Yep.
Well, I'm very much looking forward to that. And again, thank you both. And we'll be streaming this out, but you can find the Technocracy Roundtable on Courtney's channels. And hopefully we'll be all streaming it as well. But definitely check out Courtney and follow Courtney and Patrick regardless. I'll put the links in the notes as well. And again, thank you very much. Thank you both, and look forward to seeing you guys in a couple of days. I'll be in Florida, where I'm actually going to get some sun and try to reverse some of this damage of being in front of computers all the time.
Yes. Well, thank you for all you've done as well. You really laid into this, put your shoulder to it. I really appreciate everything you've done. It's amazing.
Likewise.
Thank you. That means a lot. Great. Well, have a great night. Talk to you soon.
All right.
See you later.
See you later.
Bye.
I walk past the men where the cold numbers ring, past the market of mirrors that ask me to sing. A spark in my pocket, a compass of gold says step into daylight and walk on your own. They're tagging our shadows, they're leasing our names, selling us comfort in barcode chains. But truth isn't rented and courage won't fold. It clicks like a coin you can actually hold. If they're building a cage out of whispering wires, I'll strike a match on the bars till the mouth catches fire. Raise up the ladder of daylight higher than screens, over the turnstiles of data and ministry dreams. I'll pay with a freedom no tyrant can spend. If their road has no exits, we'll cut one at the end. They promised us safety for the price of our breath, a smooth little window that stares us to death. But barter and handshake and steel in the hand still purchase the living they don't understand. When the choir of comply harmonizes my fate, I'll answer with thunder from a sovereign state. Raise up the ladder of daylight higher than screens, over the turnstiles of data and ministry dreams. I'll pay with a freedom no tyrant can spend. If the road has no exits, we'll cut one at the end. There's a key made of silence, a code made of trust. When the panopticon trembles, it falls into dust. Count down the seconds till the signal is clean. We'll settle our debts where the ledger can't see.
if the road has no exit, we'll cut one at the end. And when morning remembers the names we forgot, we'll be richer in daylight than any they